Good morning. My name is Fred Farias, and I'm the chairman of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. It is 9 a.m., and I would like to call the January 25th quarterly board meeting to order, please. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet, and those present in the boardroom may be visible to the public. Members, when I call your name, please announce present. I, Fred Farias, am present. Donna Williams, vice chair.
Present.
Javed Anwar.
Present.
Emma Schwartz via Zoom. Richard Clemmer via Zoom. Ashley Thomas.
Present.
Welcome Wilson. Daniel Wong.
Present.
Cage Sawyers. Please record in the minutes that we do have a quorum. Please excuse the absence of Ms. Hawk due to duties requiring her attention elsewhere. Do I have a motion to approve these absences?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Anwar. Thank you. Members, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Hearing none, the motion passes. The next agenda item is agenda item 2, the commissioner's remarks. The commissioner will provide his remarks on some of the agenda items that we'll be discussing today. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the board members and all of the stakeholders that have joined us here in our first meeting in the Bush Building. So today we have an important agenda that's going to cover a number of topics that are pivotal for the advancement of higher education in Texas, especially related to implementation of policies coming out of the last session. Our major policy discussion I've been looking forward to, we partnered with the American Council on Education to produce a policy brief for the board to review issues around the evolving landscape of accreditation. So in 2019, the Department of Education made changes that allow regional accreditors to cross into each other's geographic jurisdictions. So institutions aren't bound by their regional accreditors. And so that policy has continued in the current administration. And so our agency has partnered with the American Council on Education to dive deeper into this issue, the current landscape, outline what that means for Texas. And of course, we're working to align our rules in Texas with the new federal policy. So we're looking forward to discussing this work and having our colleagues from ACE join us today to provide insights. Also today, as you all know, the last legislature approved House Bill 8, which ushered in historic reforms in community college finance. And we've been working in close collaboration with community college leaders across the state. And I see some of our colleagues from the Texas Association of Community Colleges have been great partners in this work. So we are adopting at this board meeting the permanent rules for this current fiscal year. We're already into implementation on House Bill 8, but you're also going to hear from Assistant Commissioner for Funding and Resource Planning, Emily Cormier. She's going to preview some of the upcoming revisions for FY25 governing the community college finance program that we've been working on in partnership with the community colleges. Those rules will be posted for comment, and then they will come to the board in April, and then a few rules will be coming in July. So I'm excited about that discussion as well. There are some real policy innovations that are built into the new rules that will be discussed later this morning. Of course, last session created a new research endowment. The Texas University Fund was created with the passage of House Bill 1595 and then the overwhelming voter approval of Proposition 5. And that sets up a new endowment to support our emerging research universities. And so today the board's going to consider rules that will govern the eligibility and distribution methodology and reporting for the TUF. That's especially important for University of Houston, for Texas Tech, for University of North Texas, and for Texas State University. I'm thrilled that we're creating those that new structure aligned with the goals and the vision of building a talent-strong Texas to advance more of our research universities so that they can be globally competitive. Another important investment that we talked about some yesterday was an investment by the legislature to establish recurring funding for the new Texas Transfer Grant, and that provides need-based aid for high-achieving low-income transfer students. There was a gap in how our financial aid worked in the handoff from the 2-year to the 4-year institutions that disadvantaged our transfer students in being able to receive financial aid. So we were able to work with the legislature and build on the work that the board had pioneered with GEAR funds. And now we have recurring funds, and we'll have rules to establish that program to help fill that gap and support transfer students. So finally, I have a few organizational updates that I'd like to highlight for the board. So first, I'd like to introduce our interim Chief Information Officer, Layla Young. So I'm not sure where Layla's on her way in, so I'll tell you about Layla while she's on her way in. So she has been in our ISS division, in our IT division since May 2023. And as the interim CIO, she's going to be leading our IT and advising on technology strategy. So Layla is a native Austinite. She herself is a first-generation college graduate. And prior to coming to the coordinating board, she was at the Department of Insurance. So we're excited to have Layla in the role as our interim CIO. We also have another new addition in a critical role related to information technology, Kirk Burns. So Kirk is serving as our new Chief Information Security Officer. And I'm not sure if Kirk is here this morning. There he is. There in the back. Kirk was a great hire for us at the coordinating board. He's over 20 years of state experience in IT and security, and he most recently worked on information security at the Texas Health and Human Services Agency. So in addition to serving in this role, he's also a clinical faculty member for Sam Houston State University, where he teaches online courses in cybersecurity. And he's also a Texas Army National Guard Black Hawk helicopter pilot, where he served for 38 years. And we appreciate your service, and we're glad to have you as part of the team, Kirk. So that concludes my remarks, and look forward to a productive meeting today with some really important and historic rules that the board will be adopting. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do any board members have any questions for the Commissioner? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Let the minutes show that I see Ms. Schwartz is on Zoom. Welcome, Ms. Schwartz.
Good morning.
Good morning. And I'll let the minutes also record that Mr. Wilson is also present. Welcome, Wilson. The next agenda item on is public testimony, and we have not received any public testimony today, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 4A, which is consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the October 26th, 2023 quarterly board meeting. Members, you've had a chance to review these in advance. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes for the October quarterly board meeting?
So
Approved. I have a motion by Mr. Wilson, a second by Ms. Thomas. Okay. Do I have okay, any discussion? If not, members, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next is the consent calendar. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think we can approve without any comment or discussion. This allows us to have and save time for other items that need more of our attention. Highlighted in your items in gray, members, are the consent items on the agenda for today. You've had time in advance to review these items, and of course, any board member can request to any agenda item to be removed from the consent calendar if you so propose, and that'll give us an opportunity to discuss these items further later in the meeting. We're going to take up the consent calendar in two parts, non-rule items and then the rule items. The items that we have placed on the non-rule consent are 7E, which is consideration and possible action to acknowledge gifts and donations to the board. 8B, report on financial aid advisory committee activities. 8C, consideration and possible action to approve the replacement of a member on the standing advisory committee for public junior colleges for the 2026-2027 biennium. 10B, consideration and possible action to adopt the report to the board on school closures and or teach outs pursuant to Board Rule 7.76. And then 10C, consideration and possible action to adopt the recommendation relating to the July 2023 annual compliance reports for institutions under certificates of authorization, names beginning with P through Z. 10F is consideration and possible action to delegate the commissioner the authority, subject to the board notification, to approve institutional awards over $5 million for the Graduate Medical Education Expansion Grant Program. 11B, report on grants and contracts. 11C, the review of fiscal year 2024 financial report to the board. Members, at this time, does anyone want to add any other items to the non-rule consent calendar? Does anyone want to remove any items from it? If not, do I have a motion to approve the non-rule consent calendar?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Williams, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Thomas. Any discussion? If not, then members, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Members, the next item on the consent agenda item is the board rules. Board's rules are placed on the consent, either technical, conforming, or implement non-controversial policies around where there is consensus. So members, you can see the rules on the consent calendar today are 8D1, consideration and possible action to repeal and adopt Chapter 1K, Sections 1.156 through 1.162. This is concerning replacement of the Community and Technical Colleges Formula Advisory Committee with the Standing Advisory Committee for Public Junior Colleges. 8D2 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 1L concerning changes to the membership of the General Academic Institutions Formula Advisory Committee. 8D3 is consideration and possible action to repeal Chapter 9B, Sections 9.28 and 9.29 concerning certification of public community colleges as eligible to receive state appropriations. 8D4 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 13A, Section 13.1 concerning finance-related definitions. 8D5 is consideration and possible action to repeal Chapter 13D, Section 13.62 concerning updates to a manual for community college annual financial reports. A lot of consideration for community colleges. 8D6 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 13D, Section 13.63 concerning requirements for community college financial reporting. 8D7 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 13F, Sections 13.101, 13.102, and 13.104 concerning limitations on the reporting of hours to the coordinating board for funding purposes. 8D8, consideration and possible action to adopt the repeal of Chapter 13G, Sections 13.120 through 13.127 concerning restricted research expenditures. 8D9, consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 13M, Sections 13.300 through 13.304, and a new Section 13.305 concerning total research expenditures. 8D10 is consideration and possible action to adopt new Chapter 13P, Sections 13.470 through 13.477 concerning the new community college finance system. 8D11 is consideration and possible action to adopt new Chapter 13Q, Sections 13.500 through 13.506 concerning the financial aid for SWIFT transfer programs. 8D12 is consideration and possible action to adopt new Chapter 13R, 13.520 through 13.529 relating to reporting, audit, and over allocation for community colleges. 8D14 is consideration and possible action to adopt the repeal of Chapter 15C, Sections 15.40 through 15.44 concerning the National Research University Fund. 8D16 is consideration and possible action to adopt new Chapter 22K, Sections 22.200 through 22.210 concerning the Texas Transfer Grant Program. 8D17 is consideration and possible action to adopt amendments to Chapter 22L, Sections 22.226 concerning the Texas Excellence, Access, and Success Grant. 8D19 is consideration and possible action to adopt amendments to Chapter 23D, Sections 23.93 through 23.101 concerning loan repayment program for mental health professionals. 10I2, consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 2J, Section 2.202 concerning approval of distance education for public institutions. 10I3, consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Chapter 4A, Section 4.9 concerning limitations on the number of courses that may be dropped under certain circumstances by undergraduate students. 10I4 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed repeal of Chapter 4P, Sections 4.255 through 4.264 concerning approval of distance education courses and programs for public institutions. 10I5, consideration and possible action to adopt amendments to Chapter 5B, Sections 5.24, and repeal of Chapter 5C, Sections 5.41 through 5.46, 5.48, 5.50, 5.52 through 5.55 concerning academic program approvals. 10I6, consideration and possible action to repeal Chapters 9J, Sections 9.181 through 9.186, 9L, Sections 9.550 through 9.555, and 9N, Sections 9.670 through 9.678 concerning academic program approval. 10I7, consideration and possible action to amend Chapter 21D, Sections 21.51 and 21.52 concerning the Texas First Early High School Completion Program. And 10I8, consideration and possible action to adopt amendments to Chapter 22T, Sections 22.550 through 22.552 and 22.554 through 22.556 concerning the Texas First Scholarship. Members, does anyone want to remove any of the items from the rule consent calendar?
Could you repeat that?
It's in your packet. Just repeat the third page. Does anyone want to remove any items from the rule consent calendar? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of the rule consent calendar?
So moved.
I have a motion by Daniel Wong. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Members, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 6 is the major policy discussion. Major policy discussions are topics of interest where staff, policy experts, and/or stakeholders provide coordinating board members with information on higher education policy matters or initiatives that have the potential to impact Texas statewide. The major policy discussion will focus on regional accreditation. Dr. Hirono Okahana is Assistant Vice President, Executive Director of Education Futures Lab at the American Council on Education, where he oversees its research, strategic capacity building, and leadership programming portfolio. A national leader at the nexus of post-secondary education, research, practice, and policy, Dr. Okahana, among other engagements, is a member of the Board on Higher Education and Workforce at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, as well as on the National Post-Secondary Cooperative, an advisory panel to the National Center for Education Statistics. He resides in Northern Virginia with his wife, a community college associate dean, and their 2 boys. Dr. Okahana will present this item and be available for questions. Dr. Okahana, please welcome, and great that you're here this morning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Keller and the members of the board. I'm very excited to be here. You know, since you let me write the bio on my own, so it sounded really good. Not sure that I can, when I hear somebody read it, I was like, oh, wow, I'm a very impressive person. Like maybe people should listen, but Jokes aside. Again, thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Hiran O'Connor, and I work at the American Council on Education, DC-based Higher Education Association. We are the AACE is the, well, we consider the largest of higher education association and the premier convening organization of different higher education stakeholders from college leaders and institutional leaders and others. My portfolio, as the chair mentioned, that my portfolio oversees our research, strategic capacity building, and a leadership portfolio, which means that the work we do is intended to provide research and insights and evidence base to facilitate the evidence-informed conversation at the high level of policy making. So this is kind of precisely the kind of space that we would like to be at and present our work and facilitate the meaningful discussion at the policymaker levels. So we are very excited to have this opportunity. So, just as a note, this work, while I'm presenting the findings of my team, but this brief itself was worked by several of my colleagues, including Dr. Jane Kim and Daniel Melodona, two of my senior analysts, and Austin Gwen and Erica, three of associates in my team. So, any sort of like great things about this presentation and also the briefs are really credit to them. And if any shortcomings come, it's probably my fault. So, so next slide, please. So, what we were asked to provide is really working on the two major questions here that we were asked to address around it. Obviously, the regional accreditation is a pretty big topic, but areas that we focused on is looking at the different ways that these regional accreditation agencies might be incorporating. And one is the student outcome measures, like what sort of the standards are imposed by different agencies. And the other part is like how institutional innovation and the improvement piece are codified. And just as a note, next slide, please. Oh, we can skip that part. Just as a note, in terms of like the way we did it is was sort of like a desk study. So what we did, what my team did was to go through the different accreditation agencies, the documents, and to sort of decipher like what sort of the measurements and the requirements are placed in. And for this particular study, we did not do sort of individual stakeholder interviews. So, just kind of that's a nuance that I wanted to put it out there. So that's what the line around it. And, as Commissioner mentioned, although we called this presentation on the regional accreditation, as Commissioner mentioned that Department of Education eliminated this requirements for regional accreditation agency to stay within their geographical boundaries. So, in some sense, there's, the difference is really that this is more the national accreditation nowadays. But since this is the terminology we've been used often, that we still use the word regional accreditations. And as you can see, there are somewhat a geographical boundary that are listed. And for the most part, the Texas and others are in this SAC-SOC, the accreditation category. In terms of the accreditations, there are, broadly speaking, there are two types of accreditation agencies. The ones that I'll be talking about and the point of discussion, the focus of discussion is on what we call the institutional accreditation agencies. So that's the one that provide accreditation for the institution as a whole. The other types of accreditation agencies are the what we call the programmatic accreditation agency. Those are like the law school have their own accreditation scheme, or business school, or medical school. So that's not the area that I will be talking about. We'll be talking about the ones that are covering the institutional side of accreditation. And the next slide, please. So, in terms of, accreditations, this is the timely and hot topic issue, if you will. The accreditation have an important role, and one part is, the somewhat of the gatekeeper role that we talk about. they function in this the quality control side for their student learning outcomes. And also the regional accreditation status is the eligibility criteria for institutions receiving student financial aid money and others. So that sort of like a gatekeeper role is important part to play. And sort of like that's sort of like the major part in eligibility of public funding. So that plays an important role for institutions to have accreditation. But there are through that role, the accreditation agency plays a role in making institutions accountable for student outcomes. And this is the part we're going to go through, like what exactly we mean by the student outcomes. But there are sometimes, criticism around, what sort of the student outcomes the accreditation agencies might be requiring to, the type of the student outcomes that accreditation agencies are asking the institutions to report out, maybe, is that the right kind or not so great? So there's some, criticism and discussion that sometimes that occur. And gaps and inconsistency amongst accreditation agencies and sort of the types of standards that they put out. And the other part is the other discussion point around this accreditation agencies that are they responsive to the changing landscape or not? And there are there's certainly like a degree program side of it, but there are increasingly more non-degree programs within the traditional providers realm, as well as alternative providers who are providing the different types of post-secondary learning outside of traditional institution setup. So, what would their accreditation roles might going to look like, sort of things. So, there are a lot of conversation that are happening, and it's sort of like in a timely and exciting time to be talking about this topic. Next slide, please. So, this part, this is about really around the accreditation in Texas. So, you are well familiar with your local context around. Obviously, if you're degree granting institutions within Texas, they are accredited, and they go through the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools and the Commission on Colleges to receive the accreditation from. And in addition to the SACSOC, the public universities, the private degree granting institutions, and other institutions based outside of the state, but providing education and within the state, are also need to be accredited by at least one U.S. Department of Education recognized accreditation agencies. So that's sort of like where your state is. Let me go through the finding side of it. Next slide, please. So first, I'm going to go through some of the key findings associated with the student outcomes. And, it is in the briefs, but also the biggest part is, if you can go to the next slide, as I mentioned, so all 7 agencies have requirement around the student outcomes, but key takeaway would be the way they characterize the student outcomes are not always the same. And there are different ways in which the accreditation agencies might be phrasing around it. And broadly, we group it into the 2 kinds. As you can see in the slide, one is based on the learning outcomes. And then there are other kind of indicators too. Some are the learning outcomes is somewhat more qualitative description of skills or the competency that learners might be gaining if they're going through your institutions. And then other indicators are around the more quantitative student success measures. So it might be completion rates, it might be placement rate, or it might be the earnings kind of data points around it. Next slide, please. And a little bit different ways in the other agencies are characterizing these student outcomes, or fall into the 3 categories from our perspective. One focus really on curricular and also co-curricular programs, learning outcomes around it. The other focus more singularly on the academic side, so general education and academic program outcomes. And then the third one is there's no specific programs mentioned, but simply that the student outcomes is something that will be getting it. And there are different ways in which these student learning outcomes may be assessed or characterized around it. And again, there's a variation by different accreditation agencies that are doing it. If you go to the next slide. And in terms of required data points, so, universally, all accreditation agencies ask to include some type of completion or graduation rate data point. But depending on the accreditation agencies, there are different kind of the data, the student outcomes indicators, the quantitative indicators that they might be asking around. And what we find was sort of like a very wide range of variation in terms of types of data points that the accreditation agencies might be asking around. And the next slide, please. So, the one part that stood out was most, as you can see in that table, like most agencies except SACSOC was asking for the post-graduation outcomes. So that was somewhat of the kind of anomaly part that stood out. But I should also note that, not requiring certain data points does not necessarily and does not necessarily I guess that kind of impact the actual institutional performance side of it. And by that, what that means that just because the accreditation agencies are not requiring to report those data points, that doesn't automatically mean that SACSOC institutions are underperforming in certain area. We have not done sort of like a deep dive analysis of sort of how institutional performance look like by sort of different requirements, but just a cursory look, like if I gave sort of example around it, if you look at post-graduation earnings in college scorecard, for example, the University of North Texas, UNLV, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, the sort of somewhat comparable types of institutions, but in different accreditation agencies, have roughly similar median earnings of graduates. So, just because the SACSOC is not requiring the post-graduation outcome, that doesn't mean that the SACSOC institutions are underperforming compared to others, or just because others are requiring, the institutions are overperforming. So that's one nuances that we want to highlight around it. These reporting requirements does not automatically means that overall underperformance against those indicators. And that was probably the most important part to highlight around it. So in the student outcome section, we found these variation in types of information that accreditation agencies might be asking institutions to consider and including in this accreditation information. But there's more to be sort of studied about, how those different requirements would translate or not translate into individual institutional performance around it. And that is not necessarily the sort of like an end-all kind of solution by going changing the accreditation standards. Next slide, please. And the other one we look at was the institutional innovations aspect of it, to see what sort of language are used in different accreditation standards when it comes to the institutional innovations. Again, one characterization of accreditation is somewhat of a gatekeeping mechanism around it. And we wanted to see, which different accreditation agency might be sort of going beyond sort of gatekeeping side of it, but more and less encouraging institutions to seek innovative type of learning approaches and curriculum offering. So we look to see what sort of languages are used in these accreditation documents. Next slide, please. So the innovation side is not explicitly in the requirement by the federal government when it comes to the accreditation. Nonetheless, all 7 accreditation agencies we look at have some wording around the institutional innovation or improvement in their standard. For the most part, the position they take is like this continuous process of improvement for institutions. So there are some language to talk about their work in the institutional innovation side around it. They ask the institutions to review business models and work on goals and missions, resource allocation, and the governance and other parts around it, and develop a plan to improve their overall performance and the effectiveness. So those language on the innovations are there. However, what we did not see was while there are mentions of the institutional innovation and the sort of the attention and the care for the overall business model, for instance, but those are not necessarily asking the innovation level business model or efficacy around it, and so. The accreditation process themselves doesn't look into say like if you offer a new program and how the new program alone will stand itself. That's not necessarily part of the accreditation conversation either. But these parts exist around. Next slide, please. So. And then some other parts, the important part is to the accreditation agencies to encourage and harness some of the creativity amongst the faculty, staff, and administrators around it. And these language does exist to make sure that the institutions continue to respond in the changing landscape that we are seeing. And I think, beyond these just sort of accreditation side around it, some of the accreditation agencies too are very attentive to some of the changing landscape as well. So it seemed that accreditation agency themselves may be the pressing forward on some of the thoughts. Next slide, please. So the implications of these is what we find in looking at the different accreditation agencies and their work and the way they are structuring the accreditation program is sort of 3 points. Next slide, please. So one is it's still sort of depending on some of the aspect, like which accreditation process may work will probably be depending on some of the institutional context as well. That's sort of the important part around it. I think the sort of like as we are reviewing, there is certainly the gatekeeper role that they play in certain federal financial funding eligibility and others, but there are going to be more the thought partnership roles that accreditation agencies may be able to play on that. But, those kind of engagement will probably be based on the institutional context. And as you saw, different accreditation agencies have different kind of metrics when it comes to the student outcomes and the different framing around the innovation. But, that does not automatically correlate to some sort of the institutional performance or student outcomes either. So, again, that what sort of requirements may work or what sort of accreditation framework that may work and which process might work maybe depending on these institutional context. And need to be carefully consider about, what is going to be the most appropriate and most helpful way for each individual institution in thinking about these approach around. But the other parts, what we don't quite know yet from just the study alone is, what would that mean for, say, institutions undertaking different accreditation agencies? As you saw, different agencies have different reporting structures or different student outcomes measures that they might be looking for. So changing the accreditation agencies or going for the new one could mean that institutions have to think about a different way in assessing the student learning outcomes or coming up with the data infrastructure, data collection infrastructure. So, the switch is not as sort of simple as I took this route today, so tomorrow that I'm going to turn onto the right sort of thing. It's sort of like it might be, and it's a little bit more involved process around there. And that's an area which further exploration, further investigation is very much warranted. That kind of goes beyond the scope of the study. But so I think that would be the sort of the concluding part of my remark. Again, I think one part. I'm not sure like if this was the most surprising thing, but the most fascinating thing for us and for my team was that when we look through again the variation among the accreditation agency in sort of the framing different kind of student outcomes and the coming up with a different reporting standards around it. And so I think that was one of the most fascinating part in seeing. And moving forward again, it's the what would make sense and what sort of guideline and what sort of framing is most suited for institutions to best serve the learners is always going to be the good question to be putting in mind. So that's it. I'm available for any questions that you might have.
So,
Thank you, Dr. Okahana. Any questions or comments from the board members? Mr. Wilson?
So I'm surprised that SACSOC does not require outcomes-based. It says it's suggested. Why wouldn't they require that when others do?
That that might be a question for the SACSOC. Again, that we only did desk coded of these different requirements, and we didn't have chance to engage the agency and to see like what the reasoning behind and what they choose to require versus what they choose not to require.
It just seems that they seem to be light on requirements compared to other agencies. And for the commissioner, how does what SACSOC's criteria is? How does that overlap or not with the outcomes-based funding model in the state of Texas?
So this is a great question, Mr. Wilson, and that's one of the things that spurred the conversation with our colleagues at ACE is that. Of course, this board and in our Texas policymakers in general, we've been moving much more in the direction of more transparency about outcomes measures. Of course, with we have we're the first state to condition our goals on the value of credentials in our labor market. We've been working with the institutions on more transparency about those outcomes, and now. Of course, in this last session, especially the legislature really got behind that, and our community colleges are in the lead with an outcomes-based system directly tied to credentials of value. It is striking, and I'd invite here to comment on it. It is striking how much variation there is across these accreditors. It looks like New England's a little further ahead in including or requiring consideration of a broader range of outcomes measures. SACS has a more limited set. Now, it looks like SACS encourages institutions to monitor and to be public about these kinds of outcomes, but there are some important differences in those standards of accreditation. So we would one of the things I think might be important to highlight and just based on what I've heard from institutions, and Hiro might want to comment on this as well. You sort of alluded to it in your remarks. There's sort of two things. One is what are the outcome measures that are included, and then the other thing is what are the processes that the accreditors use, like how is that cashed out in practice when they're reaccrediting an institution? So you can have a measure that looks pretty good, but you can be thin on how that's specified and what you actually require to do, and vice versa, right? So where SACS has a more limited set of outcome measures, they may on what they require be more rigorous than some of the other accreditors. So just at sort of comparing standards of accreditation is different from then what does that mean in practice? What does that look like? But I'd invite Hero to comment on that.
Yes. So it is like on when I saw the sort of the table of different requirement one, definitely, by just looking at that, it does make it look that SACSOC is a little bit lighter on the requirement number of the required indicators. But as I mentioned, the number of required indicators does not, that it does not necessarily translate to actual institutional performance either. As I mentioned, just the kind of looking at, say, the earnings of graduates. Yeah, that's not the data point that SACSOC requires the institutions to put up, but UNT, their graduates earns in terms of median earning is that comparable to UNLV, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So those are like similarly sized institutions that are situated in different accreditation agency. So that's one context around there. And we did not go through to see like what the what are these indicators, like rigor in the reporting requirements and other part. But other sort of the important context to put is the regional accreditation agency is probably not the only places that institutions are required to put out the data or information. So as the commissioner mentioned, in the state of Texas, they are more that maybe like having the more push toward the data transparency and outcome transparency. So even though the accreditation agencies might not be the one imposing the certain requirements, that in combination of the accreditation agencies, state oversight the body, and others may have like a very robust way of or asking institutions to put the outcome data available. Again, not having in this in the outcome measures or not requiring does not at all mean that institutions are not working toward those goals either.
It just seems that since our kind of new mandate is to drill down into all the moving parts, analyze them, and come up with recommendations for our legislature, not having these soft kind of requirements, and some do it in spite of whether they're required or not, some don't. It would be hard to formulate. Seems like a recommendation based on variable facts.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, and then there's a case to Hero's point where it's really this board and some of the work of the systems is requiring a lot more transparency about outcome measures than the accreditor requires. Now, this is of course a very hot topic right now. There's pending legislation in Congress. There's discussions about accreditation within the states. So our intent when we partner with ACE is to try to inform these conversations, provide the board some more useful information in the legislature. Several legislators have asked us to look more deeply into these issues as they approach next session. And so our intent with ACE, so we're gonna share the findings with my counterparts across the country and with other agencies, and want to continue the work with ACE to go deeper into the kinds of questions you're asking, and even into questions about what the considerations or potential costs should be if institutions were to switch accreditors, say from SACS to HLC. So this is the sort of the first phase of this work. But to your point, we're going to have to go deeper to be able to figure out what kind of policies.
So if I'm a university in Idaho and I want to offer classes to Texas students online or otherwise, do I have to get reaccredited with SACSOC in our area, or can I just rely on the area I came from as far as claiming accreditation?
That's a specific Texas rule, so I might defer to.
Yeah, we don't. So we they would be accredited by their regional accreditor, and so there would be on the list of.
So we're still held by whatever their standards are.
Yeah.
For out-of-state institutions.
Right. So my question, Dr. Okahana, is in reading articles on this about in Inside Higher Education. So a little background: I serve on it's analogous to realignment in college football. So I'm on an advisory council for a large university in our state in athletics. And so I almost see it this way because of the fact that because the accreditation standards are different and there's different requirements, and there's talk about people switching from different states to different accreditation bodies. It's kind of almost like in the college football scene where people can switch conferences and realignment. And do you see that happening? And like the commissioner was saying, different states can go to different regions. It's not being regional anymore, like your presentation said, but it's kind of like the wild, wild west again, like in college football.
I think it's a little too soon to tell, and I think this the commissioner will probably have the more insights with his colleagues in the field around it. It's a little bit slower cycle, right? That each accreditation cycle is like it's not something institutions go through every single year. So I think some of the institutions coming to sort of the next accreditations at the period, like it'll be interesting to see if we are going to start seeing more movements. And certainly it'll be interesting to see if with the institutions are started viewing their relationship with the accreditation agencies differently. As I mentioned, when there was no choice to just to simply work within the confines of states, and that the accreditation status it is continue to be tied to the public funding, like federal financial aid eligibility, then there's certainly like a gatekeeper role of accreditation agency seems to be the sort of dominant side around it. But now that the institutions could theoretically move to other accreditation agencies, then I do wonder if sort of the interaction between the institution and the agency will sort of evolve into more the thought partnership space, where the accreditation agencies can be one of many partners that the institutions can have in figuring out the ways in which they can be more innovative in serving the learners. But I think one of sort of the key takeaway I had is like accreditation is important, but I think this is like one of many levers that policymakers as well as the institutional leaders can have in sort of helping institutions to do more and to do better for learners, right? So I think it's really, and it's like a combination of what the accreditation agency might be able to sort of push institutions to do better, state agencies the role to say that what institutions might be do better. So like it's all kind of combination, not necessarily like that choosing the accreditation agency is not going to be sort of end all in doing everything differently either.
Yeah. So just to build on that, I mean, so of course, Florida is requiring institutions to change accreditor each cycle, and they sort of put a pretty stark policy marker down. That's created a lot of issues for institutions who now are forced to find another accreditor. I think this is a highly dynamic issue, and I think one of the key takeaways is clearly like the outcome specification, the outcome measures in a lot of cases is pretty thin. It doesn't seem to overall the way accreditation is working now. It seems like it's got some limitations, especially around the issues folks care about return on investment and about the value of the credentials that are offered. So what's emerging seems to be a strong consensus across the political spectrum that this is an area that needs reform. And so regardless of how the presidential election goes, this is going to continue to be a hot topic. We want to make sure that that we can continue to build on the progress we're making in Texas, and that we're positioning this work to help inform those national conversations and some of the work that's in the other states.
I do have a couple of questions. Thank you, Dr. Okabe, for your presentation. You mentioned about a statement. You mentioned that all those 7 agencies have different outcome measure, but some agencies have different outcome measure, but you feel like even though those without those outcome measure doesn't mean it's outperform or underperforming. What do you mean by that? Is it because different regions have maybe they pick the outcome measure is based on their own region, that's why they skip out some of the outcome measure, but based on your study, it's not really indication of underperforming or overperforming, meaning those outcome measure may not be essential for certain institution or certain region, or that's what you imply, or
Not quite. I think my point is the sort of what I mentioned a few minutes ago as well. Accreditation process is not the only lever for institutional leaders or policymakers to get institutions to work toward in one direction. So it certainly plays an important role in making sure that the institutions are heading toward certain level of student outcomes or performance maybe. But the institutions have to work with state level requirements or state level mandate and institutional mission of own as well. So even if the certain indicators are not in the required part of accreditation, in the accreditation processes, there may be data reporting requirements at the state level or system level that pushing institutions to perform. So, the choice of accreditation agencies doesn't necessarily explain which institutions are going to be doing better job than the other.
Yeah, you have regional factor, you have regional government requirement, things like that nature. So my second question leads into your data methodology or collection data methodology. All those 7 agencies, have you dug into maybe different agencies have different way of collecting data? Have you studied that? What's the discrepancy, or is there any way you can unify, or you can make a observation on some of the more important way of doing data collection?
We did not go that level, the details, like the specific data collection methods or the types of, the surveys or others. Like we do know that for learning outcomes and others, there are national players that who provide a data collection, but we didn't quite look into see how individual institutions might be utilizing those data collection methods in different way or how it's being reported. But again, that's sort of to the commissioner's point, like that's the area that the further exploration in the study will be the warranted, because how individual institutions will need to operationalize these different student outcome requirements and collect the data, capture those information, reflect in a report, the accreditation report, and also reflect in the institutional decision-making process. That's sort of nitty-gritty, and the detailed part of it is to give us a little bit more insights about what exactly mean by institution A moving to the institute, the different agency, and what sort of, is it actually going to be helpful for the learners, or is it going to be different? So I think that's the area that we are looking forward to seeing more.
Interesting. Appreciate it.
Other
Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to continue working.
Education Foundation. Neil Adams, Chair and President of the Texas Higher Education Foundation, will present this item. Melissa Henderson, Executive Director of the Texas Higher Education Foundation, will be available for questions. Welcome, Mr. Adams. I would like to say we had an outstanding meeting yesterday. Several of our board members are also on the foundation, and a lot of great work happening. And so thank you for the relationship and the partnership with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and the Texas Higher Education Foundation. So welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here again, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Coordinating Board. It's like coming back home. Spent 2001 to 2007 on this board, and is really what has kept me focused on higher ed policy and what's happening in the state of Texas. And so the segue off that board to the foundation board was really a blessing for many of us. I wanted to, I know we have some new members on the board. Ashley, good to see you, and Kay just stepped out, but and I understand one of the other board members is not here today, had a conflict. But when I went on the coordinating board in 2001, interestingly enough, that board, along with many other state agency boards, had 18 members. And so when I went on the board, I had 5 other colleagues with me. And during that 01 to 07, the legislature passed statute to really reduce all of these state agency boards over time down to 9 members as it is today. And but in 2001, Pam Williford, who was the chairman of the board at the time, her idea is that and discussion with the whole board is we really needed to form a 501c foundation that would support the Higher Education Coordinating Board, because so many foundations that support philanthropically higher ed across the country, they won't provide grants to the state agency, but they would provide grants, as we've experienced, to a foundation that supports the state agency. And so started out a little slow in 01, but has really picked up pace in recent years. Interestingly enough, I'll give you a little background too. We're up to 20 members on the board. 10 of those members are former members of this coordinating board. 51% of the board under the bylaws of the foundation have to be selected and appointed by the chair of the coordinating board. With the other 49% are elected by the board itself. We have a real cross-section of men and women who have served in various capacities, not only in state agencies, but as well as universities and community colleges across the state. So bring a wealth of experience in higher ed from different perspectives. I want to personally thank Commissioner Keller and the staff, because without their experience and what they brought to the table when Harrison was hired as the commissioner has been incredible in terms of where the foundation has gone and the doors that have been opened, and the philanthropic support of higher ed public policy in the state of Texas. And I want to I think take a personal moment, and I know I speak for all 20 members of the Board of Trustees, to thank Commissioner Keller, Melissa Henderson, who's our executive director of our foundation, wearing several hats, Maeve Leahy, who's the deputy chief of partnerships, Jacqueline Lee, who's the senior director of strategic initiatives and engagement, Virginia Berry, who is the director of state and national partnerships, Catherine Moss, who is the development and communication associate, and Monique Mendoza, who is the administrative assistant, as well as many other staff members that are staff for the coordinating board, but really assist the foundation in implementing the various initiatives that the foundation, through the leadership of Dr. Keller and his staff, to really impact public policy and provide instruments that really help young men and women make wise decisions about their future in higher ed. Parents, and ultimately, I think there'll be some data shared with the universities that would be very helpful in them making some decisions about what are they offering. Is it meaningful? Does it lead to meaningful jobs? And that's really what we're all about in higher ed, is to making a difference in young people's lives through education, and particularly higher ed. I'll turn it back to Melissa, but thank you for the opportunity to come and share.
Thank you, Chairman and members. So as Neil mentioned, and as y'all know, my name is Melissa Henderson. I serve as Chief of Staff and also as Executive Director for the Foundation. Next slide. So as Neil mentioned, the Foundation has been around since 2001. It is the official nonprofit partner to the agency. And really our mission is to support the strategic priorities of the agency and to catalyze the great work that goes on across the agency by bringing in philanthropic resources to support that work. So we work very closely with partners internally and externally to elevate the coordinating board's role as a national thought leader, advancing innovative policy solutions in higher education and workforce. Next slide. Again, as Neil mentioned, none of this would happen without our amazing team. And so did want to thank and acknowledge the incredible strategic partnerships team that Neil mentioned and that you see referenced here. So again, thank you to our incredible team. Next slide. So over the last 20 years, the foundation has brought in about $35 million, a third of which, around $14 million, has been brought in the last 4 years with Commissioner Keller's leadership. You can see here that that work is spread across a number of key priorities, all of which you will recognize and really serve as again, that catalyst and that accelerant for the great work across the agency. Next slide. So the current portfolio that the foundation is managing is just shy of about $6 million. You can see that that is, again, across a number of key initiatives and projects, working with funders across the state and across the nation to advance, again, much of the great work that goes on across the agency and in partnership with the board. Next slide. So this is just a different view in how the work is spread across the agency. So a lot of that work, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these in depth, has been around our data modernization work. We've been fortunate to have great support from our national philanthropic partners. And I know many of you have heard the commissioner say that we're far ahead of where he thought we might be, and that is in large part as a result of the philanthropic investment that has enabled the work to go farther, faster. Another area, of course, is academic affairs. A lot of that work around college and career advising, making sure that as we are designing the college and career advising tools, that we are doing so and able to do so with an eye toward user needs and making sure that we're getting those tools into the hands of the users, students and families across the state. Next slide. So this one just drills down on that data modernization work. Again, a significant portion of our work has focused on this. So again, as y'all know, Commissioner Keller, one of his key priorities coming into this role was to better leverage the data that this agency has as the steward of for the state, and really putting that into the hands of institutions and other stakeholders to inform actionable decision-making. And that work has been catalyzed by about $5.8 million in philanthropic investment that has really helped to ensure that we're able to optimize the use of the $37 million that we were able to bring in through federal GEAR funds and really, again, accelerate that work. That has led to, of course, our public data site, which rolled out last year, as well as our privileged data reports, which we launched at the end of 2023. And are continuing to evolve, making sure that, again, we're getting that data into the hands of institutions and other stakeholders to help inform all of the decisions that they are making as it relates to students. Next slide. Another area, again, as I mentioned, that we have been fortunate to be able to support through the foundation is our college and career advising work, whether that's with My Texas Future or Apply Texas. Really having resources for designing the tools that we are building with the users in mind, making sure that we have the resources to get those tools into the hands of students and families across the state. Of course, as y'all know, our initial rollout of My Texas Future last year was focused on adult learners. And with philanthropic investment, we were able to do work to poll individuals across the state, oversampling in Houston with some college, no credential, to really understand what are the barriers that they're facing, how do we reach them, what are the messages that resonate, resources to develop that creative content that really speaks to those messages and resonates with our audiences. And we'll continue to do that work as we continue to roll out additional iterations of My Texas Future for our K-12 population and other audiences that we will be reaching through My Texas Future. Additionally, same with Apply Texas. We also had resources for design research for Apply Texas, so that as we are building out that site, embedding it within My Texas Future, that all of this is part of a larger cohesive strategy with our, again, all of this with our users in mind at the end of the day. Next slide. And then finally, the Community College Finance Commission work, we had resources with philanthropy for things like public polling and message testing, design and marketing that really helped us support that work to develop the user-informed final report that was a part of the conversations with the legislature during the last session. So really, across all of these, These are support and foundational components that help accelerate and enhance the impact of the work across a number of fronts. Next slide. So with that, wanted to ask the commissioner if you have anything you would like to add. And again, just appreciate the opportunity to work with the foundation and with the coordinating board to continue to build that partnership and support the great work. Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And so first want to just express my public and deep appreciation for Neil and the foundation board and the partnership with the foundation board. As our chairman knows and Mr. Anwar knows, when I interviewed for this job, one of the things there were three things I highlighted as unique assets that the coordinating board has. One is the unbelievably rich data that the coordinating board is charged to be a steward of, our education and workforce data. The second one is our state student loan program. We're the only state that has a student loan program backed by general obligation bonds, and there's tremendous potential there. But the third one was the foundation. And so when you decided to give me the nod, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Anwar, we so met with Neil and talked to him about the idea that we needed to deepen that partnership with the foundation to help us move faster. We had no idea what was coming. Of course, we had no idea that we were going to suddenly be called on to support institutions through the pandemic. And you can see in the projects that Melissa highlighted that it was the foundation that spearheaded work and enabled us to move quickly to help institutions get emergency aid deployed to students. We had nearly half our institutions did not have an infrastructure to deploy emergency aid. So even when we could make the emergency aid available, they didn't have the systems available to get those or to get those dollars in the hands of the students who needed it. And so it was really the foundation's leadership that helped bridge that gap quickly, so that when governor and legislative leadership deployed year funds through the agency, we were able to get emergency aid out there to keep tens of thousands of students enrolled and help bridge those gaps that had emerged. It's also, as they've highlighted, there are a number of areas where it would be pretty hard to use public dollars to do design research, to do public polling, to do message testing. And in particular, I'd highlight around the data infrastructure work. So as the board knows well, but many of the stakeholders may not, we have now all of our data is in the cloud in a more secure, modern infrastructure. We're running Snowflake in the Microsoft Azure cloud. So we are one of the leaders in the nation now for how we're able to work with our educational and workforce data. That's because of strategic investments made through the foundation. So with our state and national philanthropies investments, we were able to engage experts who are working on the frontiers of these issues, help us design the systems and the approach that then we could use the public dollars to deploy. And one of the things not on the slide on the data in particular that I'd highlight is now the legislature has come in with recurring funding to support the maintenance and continued development of that system. So we have strategic investments from the foundation, and then the one-time investments from the governor and legislative leadership to stand up the new system, and the recurring funding from the legislature. That's a unique partnership that you don't see across the country. And as Melissa's alluded to, I tell everybody we're more than a year ahead of where I could have ever hoped to be in implementation because of the foundation. But I don't believe that we would have the kind of innovative modern infrastructure that we've been able to deploy without that support from the foundation. It's a unique, strong partnership that enables us to go faster, to make better recommendations to the policymakers, to better execute against our mission, to be a resource, to be a credible partner, to be an advocate for Texas higher education. And again, Neil, I'm just so deeply appreciative of you and your leadership and the partnership with the foundation board.
Well, it's 19 other board members. 3 are sitting at your table, and chairman and vice chairman, and welcome, that are also a member of this board. And who am I missing?
Well, that's it from this board.
Huh?
That's it from this.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. I thought I missed something. I think from my perspective, and obviously since '01, particularly been involved in higher ed public policy for Texas in different capacities, but also having my foot, as some people know, in the public ed sector for a number of years, 30-something years. And what's exciting to me, and Harrison, I've had this discussion, and Melissa, is that those silos that existed for so many years with public ed, higher ed, and workforce commission are now being broken down, and these 3 agencies are working together. And but for that, this data really would not be meaningful, because it's got to cut across all 3 of those agencies and the people that are served, and the young men and women that are served by all 3 agencies. So that's exciting from my perspective, and I'm just we're honored and pleased that we're more relevant today than we have been in the past, and that's why we're here. So thank you for the opportunity. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Neil and Melissa. Any comments or questions for our panelists?
No, just a quick comment that just to accentuate what Neil is saying, that the foundation is able to be more nimble in certain areas and get ahead of responsibilities that are handed to the coordinating board. So it's really been a great model to leverage front-end money from the foundation into money allocated to the coordinating board, which then trigger bigger money in the overall educational community. So it's really a way to fast track it. So it's good working model.
I mentioned yesterday at our board meeting, I think there's one word that really describes what's going on, and it starts with Dr. Keller's office, and that's trust. I think the foundation being there to do what it's done has allowed him to build trust that he might not otherwise have had on the Hill. And getting those public resources now to support these initiatives is just unprecedented, that I've never ever seen before in terms of what the coordinating board's doing nowadays. So,
any other comments or questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Adams, for being here, Neil. Appreciate you. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Neil.
We're moving on to agenda item 7B, which is an update on building a talent strong Texas. Melissa Henderson, Chief of Staff and Executive Director for the Texas Higher Education Foundation, will provide an overview and be available for questions. Ms. Henderson.
Good morning again, Chairman and members. This morning, I'll be giving a brief update on our ongoing rollout of our Building a Talent Strong Texas plan. So since our last update in October, we've continued work related to various aspects of the plan, in particular, as we've just been talking about, our data resource efforts, and also in credentials of value, which of course lies at the heart of both the plan itself, our Building a Talent Strong Texas plan, and also the community college finance funding model. It's exciting that the legislature, as we've talked about already this morning, got behind the Talent Strong Texas plan last session in a number of ways, including alignment of the metrics for the Texas University Fund, the rules for which are being considered at this board meeting, as well as aligning the new community college funding model through House Bill 8, most notably again in its focus on credentials of value. On this front, our work has continued in close collaboration with colleges to develop rules for fiscal year 25, which you will hear more about later this morning. We'll come to the board in April and July, and we look forward to continuing to work closely with our institutional partners moving forward. Finally, in December, at our pre-conference for Higher Edge, we were excited to have the opportunity to train nearly 100 institutional stakeholders on the new secure data dashboards, again, that we've talked about, which focus on labor market outcomes, graduation rates, and transfer for students across the state. We'll be holding additional trainings in the future, including one coming up next month for 20 provosts, 2-year and 4-year provosts from across the state, as part of our ongoing work to continue supporting institutions as we continue to develop new data resources. As always, an exciting time for work across these various fronts. Look forward to continuing to keep you closely posted. Commissioner, anything you would add to that?
No, again, just to want to highlight how much we appreciate our partnership with the institutions, how much we appreciate the partnership with our funders. We look forward to coming back to the board and providing updates on the work that we have over these next several months. And so we would again, we're able to move much faster because of these strategic partnerships, and we don't take them for granted. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Members, any questions for Ms. Henderson? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Ms. Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman.
Agenda item 7C is an update on the Texas Transfer Initiatives. Elizabeth Mayer, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, will present this item and be available for questions. Welcome, Ms. Mayer.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right. My name is Elizabeth Mayer, and I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs. And as I do every quarterly board meeting, I'm going to provide you an update on the exciting work that's going on in transfer. So next slide, please. So we've made some, I think, pretty substantial progress. So now we have 8 completed, completely revised fields of study. The most recent was for history. So you can see there it says the BS only. So we ran into some challenges with the BA, and I will get to that in just a second in terms of next steps. But these are all fully approved, and we'll be sending a notification out regarding history later this week. As you all will recall, biology had some challenges. There were not really enough lower division space in the existing framework. So we are going to, we've completed the work of the alternative framework work group, which I'll get to in a minute. And we'll, after we do some work on that, we'll circle back around to biology. Exercise science or kinesiology, those courses, that subcommittee met, and unfortunately there were not enough courses in terms of the ACGM, the academic course guide manual. So what we did is we convened a small group to develop new courses, and we're hoping to have those out for public comment and get the field's perspective based upon the work of that stakeholder group. And after that work is complete, we'll circle back around and reconvene that subcommittee to work through potentially developing a revised field of study. Education, we have completed that and are currently in the process of collecting the directed electives for that. And then English had some similar challenges as to biology. So we'll circle back around after we complete the alternative framework work. And then communication. So at the last Texas Transfer Advisory Committee meeting that met in the fall, they recommended approving that. So that will actually go out for public comment for 30 days so that the institutions can respond to what that work group came up with. If there's no substantive issues, then we will likely move forward with collecting those directed electives from the institutions. So in terms of an update for the alternative framework work group, so the work completed their work, and the Texas Transfer Advisory Committee at that fall meeting went ahead and recommended moving forward with developing and putting that new alternative framework into rule. So the issue really was for biology and a couple of our disciplines. The way that the framework, the existing framework works is there's roughly 42 hours of the core and then 18 hours of the lower division discipline courses. And there's just not enough space. So basically what they're recommending is potentially doing 30 hours of the core curriculum and then giving that 30 hours for the discipline. So that's what those rules will reflect. And then after those rules are put in place, we're planning to bring those to July. We will go back and circle back around with biology, the history for the BS, as well as English, and move on to computer and information sciences and engineering. So that is the work in terms of the field of study, but we have some additional work going on. Just in terms of the number of faculty who have participated in these, I think I mentioned this last time, we've had over 400 faculty who have participated in all of these subcommittees. And this work could not be done without the partnership of all of our institutions and the faculty that give up their time. I think you guys have heard me mention before, this is a 2-day in-depth. The faculty are typically very passionate about their discipline. So it's a commitment from them to work through this process. So in addition to this, at the last TTAC meeting, we also talked about potentially working on looking at the possibility of doing a meta major fields of study. So I think this is something I think that's been talked about before, but I think a lot of students potentially know that they want to go into a STEM field, but don't necessarily know potentially the specific discipline that they want to go into. So we're going to do some analysis to see if this is going to be possible. And Commissioner, I don't know if you want to offer any additional comments on this one.
So this is a strand of work I'm particularly excited about. So that we've discussed with the leadership of the TTAC, both 4 years and the 2 years. So again, as Elizabeth mentioned, even when students are absolutely certain that they know what they want to major in, about half the time they end up changing their minds. But a lot of that is because, well, how many majors does anybody know, and how much do you know when you're 18 about what you want to major in? But a lot of times students, even though they might have their particular major might change, they know they're interested in STEM fields, or they might know that they're more interested in public service, or more interested in health professions. So the idea is we will have our opportunity for students to earn our Texas Direct transfer degrees in specific fields of study that are the most frequently transferred pathways, but also exploring the possibility of creating these more general sort of meta major kind of structures, so that if a student isn't sure what I want to major in chemistry or biology or then they don't have to commit and make that decision and take all the biology courses or take all the chemistry courses, where they could take a program where they would still be assured that courses would transfer and apply to their programs, but they wouldn't have locked themselves in. And so it would help students optimize their choices and improve efficiency in the system overall. So this is another area where because of the strong partnership between the 2-year institutions, the 4-year institutions, and the momentum around this work on transfer, the legislature has really gotten behind that work and aligned policy with our Texas Direct initiative. And even this session adopted a policy change so that students in early college high schools are going to need to, the default will be that they need to be on a pathway that would result in a direct transfer degree. And so we're trying to provide a better range of options for students, including potentially these meta major options that would give students a good solid jumping off point for a number of different specific disciplines.
And then lastly, as the commissioner just mentioned, with the implementation of HB 8, we are also going to be working on just revising our transfer rules so that can reflect those revisions, including the Texas Direct that was put into statute this last legislative session, as well as the notation on a student's transcript of the Texas Direct transfer degree. And that concludes my update on transfer.
I have a question. When we are determining which fields of study we want to take on next, are we considering fields of, not fields of study, but credentials of value? How is that tie in with what we are?
Yeah. So, Commissioner, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think one of the things that we really look at is in terms of what are the students majoring in. And so looking at that, as well as potentially the credentials of value piece, is something that we likely need to probably start looking at more closely. But what we started with initially is really looking at what are the most common majors in terms of that list, because one of the challenges, I think, is we have students majoring in those top. So we provide the data to the Texas Transfer Advisory Committee, and they're the ones that really make the decision of which disciplines to pursue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very good. Next, we'll move on to agenda item. Thank you. Agenda item 7D, an update on the program approval. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item and be available for questions. Ms. Mayer.
Okay. Next slide. So I think you all have the last several meetings since we have adopted the new rules for the program approval back in October of 2022. I've provided an update on kind of where we are in this process. And so I'm going to provide you a good line of sight about how we're moving forward with this work. So the next slide, please. So here you can see the goals that were actually the foundation of the work even before the rules were implemented when we started with our stakeholder group. So as you all know, we really want to better align our degree and certificate approval processes to the agency's refreshed strategic plan. We want to bring the agency rules and procedures in line with statute. We also want to make sure that we're minimizing institutions' regulatory burden and supporting them. They have a lot that they're doing in terms of data and things like that. So we just want to make things as easy as possible for them. We also want to prioritize the board meetings on the most meaningful program approval questions. And then achieving that policy objective of really having that comprehensive catalog of all of our credentials offered in the state, which is not something we've had before. So really getting a full understanding of what those institutions are offering. And then lastly, improve the administratability of the program review and approval processes that are feasible, efficient, and flexible. Next slide. So the progress to date. So I just want to start by saying this would not be possible without the leadership of Dr. Emma Gelslinger on our team. She really has worked hard to work on the actual implementation of this important effort. So you can see here, we've made some good progress since the last board meeting on the implementation of the new program approval rules. And now the distance education and academic certificate rules that went into effect in November and December. So we have now 2 online program approval forms that were launched in the new data submission portal and are live for the institutional submission. And again, I just want to mention that this part of the implementation of the forms requires significant effort on the part of our ISS or our IT team, as well as our project management divisions. And we want to make sure that they're recognized for these contributions. This is a complex implementation and is really a cross-divisional effort across the agency. An initial academic certificates form has been added to the website for institutions, really to align with the new rules that went into effect on November the 1st. And this is a short, streamlined form similar to the planning notification. And we intend to move this into an online form as well once we've completed the forms in progress. In addition, the Division of Digital Learning has also posted a form to our website for institutions to submit new or renewals of institutional plans for distance education based on the new rules that went into effect on December the 1st. Next slide. So at this point, our top priority is really working with ISS and the project management office to get these remaining forms launched in the new portal. So we've discussed this with ISS and we're currently working to meet an April 1st deadline. We're also working on developing a Power BI dashboard for our current academic certificates for universities and our health-related institutions to reference as they determine which additional certificates to notify the coordinating about based upon our new rules. And we're also regularly adding and updating resources as we move through this implementation process and trying to collaborate and partner with our institutions as we move through all of these revisions of the forms and updates across the project. Next slide. So now I'm just going to provide you an update about where we are in terms of new approved and pending academic and workforce requests that we have received. Next slide. So here you can see the significant amount of work that our division has been working on. We've had 16 new degree programs that have been approved since the last board meeting. And so this is October 5th through January the 3rd. And there's 16 that have been approved, and you can see the various disciplines that are reflected there, the most being in those health professions and related clinical sciences. And then we've had the planning notification. There's 30 there. As you recall, the new rules require that any new program now, they must submit that planning notification. In many ways, that gives us a good line of sight in terms of what's going to be coming in terms of review and analysis time for our team. And then the various program changes. And this typically includes title changes and designation revisions. We've had some phase outs as well as those administrative changes. The administrative changes typically is the creation of our changes to administrative units, such as departments or colleges, and then institutions notifying us of these changes so we can ensure that our program inventory is consistently kept up to date. Next slide. These are the things that are in the queue for us right now. So we have 32 new program requests that our team will be reviewing. And you can see the various disciplines here that are in the queue. As you can see, this is also, we have 7 health professions. And then the next is in engineering. So this is just kind of a breakdown of the things that our team will be working on over the next couple of months. Next slide. And this is giving you some information about our workforce programs. So we have had 4 new associate's degrees that have been approved, as well as 2 new level 1 certificates and 1 new level 1 certificate. Next slide. And then here is a breakdown of the things that we have pending for the workforce area. So we have 18 new associate's degrees, 11 new level 1 certificates, and then 3 advanced technical certificates. So there's 32 items, and you can see the various disciplines there reflected, with the highest again in the health professions and related clinical sciences. Next slide. Yeah. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Members, do you have any questions for Ms. Mayer? Thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item 7E is consideration of possible action to acknowledge gifts and donations to the board. This item was approved on consent. Agenda item 7F is discussion and overview proposed fiscal year 2025 Community College Finance System rules. Emily Cormier. There's Emily, Assistant Commissioner for Funding, will provide an overview and be available for questions. Ms. Cormier.
Good morning, Emily Cormier, Assistant Commissioner for Funding. And before we kick off, Commissioner, did you want to make some remarks on it, or just as we go through?
Yeah, so just to clarify, yesterday we had more of a discussion about permanent rules for FY24, and so that's one of the important things for this board meeting is adopting the permanent rules for the current implementation of House Bill 8 and the new outcomes-based funding system. But now we're going to have a discussion looking ahead to the rules for FY25. And we've been working in close partnership with college leaders across the state, and especially with my friend Ray Martinez and his team at the Association of Community Colleges, and the former Deputy Commissioner Ray Martinez, and with input from policymakers and other stakeholders, and we're excited to bring this preview to the board to highlight some of the important changes for FY25 to more fully realize the vision behind House Bill 8 and the outcomes-based system. So we'll talk about a few of those highlights, and happy to take any questions. Look forward to the discussion.
So moving to the next slide. So as we mentioned, we're just going to kind of set the context and recap what all we've done, and then really focus on what are those major changes as we move from the first year of implementation to the next. Next slide. And then next slide. So this chart is really just to lay out kind of how quickly we've moved from idea of community college finance reform to implementation, just a couple short years, although those years had quite a bit of work within it. And so just kind of want to say that we'll be focusing on this 2024, where we're really refining our methodology and moving into our new rules that we're going to be adopting in April and July. Next slide. And here we've laid out the milestones that we've kind of crafted. So how we are planning to bring forward policy to you at each of the board meetings. So we're going to be spending our time today on this April box here. These are rules that will be posted for public comment tomorrow, actually. So this is kind of a preview for the field as well, and really kind of will lay out the policy framework for the community college finance system moving forward. Once we have that in, we'll be able to spend the spring working with our institutions to refine. And then as we move into July, we'll be able to really dial in the funding model as we implement that framework. Next slide. And so just to kind of make a note, none of the work that we've kind of done to date would have been possible. None of the policy decisions or discussions without the input of our standing advisory committee, as well as our Association of Community Colleges. We absolutely could not have understood and implemented the system and created this new policy framework without their expertise. Next slide. And now we'll switch it gears into moving. So what are we changing from fiscal year 24 to 25? Next slide. And so before diving in, just kind of a recap or kind of a high level overview of what the current system now is. So as we're all very aware, 95% of the funding is performance-based, 5% is for the base tier. And while small, that's really integral to our small, rural, and property poor institutions in the state. So the performance tier is based on those three main factors: the achievement of 15 semester credit hours of dual credit, transfer to a public general academic institution, and the achievement of a credential of value. And that includes those short-term workforce credentials. And there's also an added incentive for those in the high demand field. Both the performance and the base tier also apply weights based on student economic or academic disadvantage. And so that's kind of the layout of how the funding model works. So the four main areas that will be changing predominantly impact the performance tier, but some of them do infiltrate to the base tier as well. So there's going to be some kind of additions to how we look at the credentials of value. We're going to be adding some new fundable credentials. And then we're also really tightening up our methodology of how we define a high demand field in the state. And in addition, we're really looking at kind of calibrating how we process data, how we gather data to make sure that we're pulling the right levers and all of the different incentives to make sure we're matching what we're trying to achieve in the state. So moving to the next slide. So here we kind of lay out our credential of value. And so we're really refining this concept further by adding a second layer to this outcome through our performance-based formula. The first tier in the formula is what's called the credential of value baseline. And then we're adding the second tier, which is this credential of value premium, which is really looking at an individual student experience. So now I'll turn it to the commissioner to kind of talk through these two concepts.
So one of the distinctive features of the Texas system is that we've connected the outcomes-based funding system to our goals and Talent Strong Texas around production of credentials of value. But just to illustrate where for individual students earning credentials of value, that return can vary. So I was a graduation speaker at one of our community colleges this last year, and we were shaking hands with the students as they came across the stage. And there was one student, I shook their hand. I said, "Congratulations!" And the student looked me dead in the eye and said, "This was the best year of my life." And a few students later, a student shook my hand. I shook the student's hand. I said, "Congratulations!" The student looked me dead in the eye and said, "It took me 8 years." So they were earning the same credential, but their paths to that credential was pretty different. And so one of the things we've been talking about with the community colleges, so as we've talked about our focus on student success and the importance of having clear paths to finish, clear recommended sequences of courses, the community colleges have actually been in the vanguard because of the work that they've done on what they call guided pathways, of being able to provide students, here's a clear path, clear sequence of the courses to take. The idea now is within the funding system to align the way that we talk about credentials of value and the way those incentives are structured with the student success efforts. So we don't just want to say produce more credentials of value if all the students took 8 years to finish, right? So the idea is to have more of an incentive, not only for the student to complete a credential of value, but for that student to complete the credential of value on a trajectory where a typical student should be able to realize that value of that credential for the student. So this is something that we worked closely with community college leaders on, and is an important policy innovation, and will be a new proposed feature for the system for FY25.
Moving to the next slide. So in the first year of implementation, we really had to get this off the ground quickly. So we kind of fell onto what were fundable credentials that the coordinating board had always collected. So this was really the standard bachelor's, associate certificates, and occupational skills award. We were also able to be responsive to legislation's call that we incentivize short-term workforce credentials. And so we came up with a new data point, the institutional credentials, leading to licensure or certification. And so those ones will continue to be funded in FY25, but we're also going to be adding and refining for FY25. So for those institutional credentials leading to licensure or certification, just to kind of acknowledge the transition into the new system, institutions were allowed to count students who had received the licensure or certification, but had not actually been conferred a credential. So we'll be modifying that in the next year so that a credential must be earned, and that will allow us to roll that data point into our standard reporting systems. We're also going to be adding 2 new programs, the Texas Opportunity High School Diploma and third-party credentials, and I'll see if the commissioner wants to talk a little bit about those 2.
Yeah, so the Opportunity High School Diploma is a new Texas high school diploma that's focused on adults who have not earned high school diplomas or equivalency. So what we've heard from actually was just in a meeting with one of our major Texas employers just last week, and we were talking about this issue that they have a number of associates who work with them who don't have high school diplomas, don't have GEDs. They've been out of school for a while. What we've heard from the colleges is that these students can't advance in their workforce programs many times beyond a certain point because they don't have high school diplomas. Our rough estimate is there's at least 2 million working age Texans who would fit into this category. One of the exciting elements of House Bill 8 is we're creating a new high school diploma to be awarded by the community colleges. It is a competency-based high school diploma. The idea is to meet people where they're at, figure out what they need to do to complete the diploma, but we're not just trying to shoehorn a traditional high school diploma into a program for adults. In close partnership with TWC, we're engaging employers in this conversation about what are the kinds of things that folks need to know and be able to do in their quantitative reasoning, their scientific reasoning, in terms of civics and communication skills, and also there we go. Yeah. All right. So with TWC in partnership with employers, so we'll be developing new criteria. We have 5 community colleges that are leader colleges for this initiative. So Austin Community College, Alamo, El Paso Community College, Dallas College, and San Jacinto College are the design partners. But the way the legislation is put together is it's 5 colleges or consortia of colleges. So we have other colleges interested in offering the diploma that'll partner with these leader colleges and being able to offer the diploma. The colleges have told me they'd like to move fast so that they could go ahead and get into initial implementation, ideally by next fall. And thanks to philanthropy and our work with the foundation, Jobs for the Future is going to be a partner in that initiative. And so we'll keep the board apprised about the progress of it, but we're very excited about being able to provide this new opportunity for Texas students. That will provide seed funding through the funding that we had from the legislature to support innovations in educational programs. And then as Emily described, the recurring funding for the program will come in the context of the outcomes-based formula. Also in third-party credentials, I'll be much briefer about that. The idea is to include some of those credentials that are more industry-led credentials that have real value. So for example, if you have you have a psychology undergraduate degree or you have a psychology undergraduate degree with a Google Career Certificate in data analytics. The delta in typical salaries between those two students could be on the order of about $20,000. So sometimes you can significantly enhance the market value of your program by embedding other kinds of third-party credentials. I use Google as an example because they partnered with the community colleges to provide those programs at no charge to the community colleges. They're also partnering with many of our university systems. So, so the idea is to bring some of these third-party credentials into the outcomes-based incentive structure. The way that we'll do this, because we don't, this is very much working on the vanguard. So there, we don't have a lot of historical wage data about the value of these credentials. But we are able to rely on a partnership with the American Council on Education that's reviewed a wide range of third-party credentials, including the Google credentials and other credentials, and piggyback on their assessments and recommendations for what sort of credit should be awarded for these. So we're gonna start bringing into our outcomes-based system third-party credentials that have met the criteria being above the same kind of contact hour threshold that we're using for other workforce credentials that are part of our incentive-based system. Going over time across the board for all of the workforce credentials, including the third-party credentials, the colleges are going to be collecting more data, including student identifiers, so we can bring all of that into our credential value methodology. But for an interim step, we're planning to rely on ACE's evaluation of these credentials, but would be happy to take any questions about our approach on that.
So this third-party credential basically channeled through the community college and technical college, right?
That's right.
So we have, that's a good way of doing that actually, because it's better arranged, better organized, better coordinated, and better recognized.
And we're able to track better what credentials students are earning. And for the students, then they earn these credentials through their community colleges.
Commissioner Keller, whenever you're talking about the I think it was a slide before the ROI on the credentials of values, how is that being calculated exactly? If you have outliers, if you have a sociology major that starts a film business and they're significantly exceeding the average salary from that program, or then vice versa, you have someone that didn't pan out, are you taking those outliers on the bell curve into consideration, or is it only like acceptable employment where there's an offer letter with a salary attached to it?
So this is a great question, KJ. I appreciate your asking, because what we're doing is we're relying on analysis of what a typical student's return on investment can be, because you could always have an outlier. To your point, you could always have a student that had an outsized return on their investment. Of course, you can also have students on the other direction, like a typical student does very well, but then for that individual student might have more trouble landing a job for whatever reason. So what we do is we look across all of our data and we ask the question about what's the value of that credential to Texas employers. So we look at what typical wages are like for that credential in the Texas labor market. So it's not a credential value for philosophical reasons, because I value it or the board values it. It's because Texas employers value it. So what we do is we look at the costs, out-of-pocket costs for students versus their typical wage experience. And we even account for opportunity costs because we have good data through our partnership with TWC on what students have earned while they're enrolled. And then we just ask the question, are they better off? And if they're not, a typical student would not be better off, we don't want to count that credential. So that's why I'm saying, like, this is an important innovation in the community college finance system to say, well, not only we're saying this type of credential is a credential value, but we'll have a new component where we will say for that individual student, did that individual student complete that credential in a timely manner? Are they on a trajectory to be able to realize the value of the credential? If so, then the college is actually going to get an additional bonus for that individual student being on that trajectory. So that way we're looking at credentials of value in our Texas economy, and we're connecting that directly to the student success efforts of the colleges.
Mhm. I have a question on the Texas Opportunity High School Diploma. It's going to be administered through the 5 community colleges. Was there any thought behind dropping the word high school? Or why are we keeping?
Well, this is a real high school diploma. So it was deliberate that, this isn't an equivalency like a GED or something like that. So these are folks who dropped out of high school, and they need to be able to get that credential so that they could move on. And so the way it's structured in the statute is it's a real Texas high school diploma, and it's treated like a Texas high school diploma. For example, for students' eligibility to enroll in other like academic programs in higher ed and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So it's a new model for a high school diploma, but instead of being linked to the more conventional kind of assumptions about what high school is supposed to look like, it's really going to be driven much more by the expectations of employers. And that lets us bring in these employability skills, these soft skills into the mix of what we want to make sure these students are equipped with.
So could a student who is high school age just not go to high school and go through this program to get that
So,
they were working for?
One of my kids asked me that question, actually. So I have for the audience, I have 3 teenagers at home, so I get a lot of unfiltered feedback. And so no. It's just for adults. So it's just really for folks who are already older than 18, in case any of the Keller kids are listening, who could take this program.
All right, thank you.
Other comments or questions, or we're still at the presentation?
Yes, please move to the next slide.
Thank you. That's okay. Now we're good.
So another key area that we're refining is how we define a high demand field in the state. So while similar in concept to what we did before, in which we're looking statewide and regional at what are we're really tightening up in a few key areas. So in one way, we're starting to use the Texas Comptroller's regions. So these align more closely with workforce development areas, so we can do better labor market analysis. And then we're also being more sensitive to the regional needs by actually creating region-specific lists. The old methodology kind of looked at what was in the regions and then added it to the statewide. So now each region will have their list as well. And then pretty importantly, we're laying out a new process to do what is called essential and emerging fields. And so this provides a way for colleges to basically petition the coordinating board to consider other external factors that may not be obvious in the data. So this could be that there's chronic shortages in filling jobs in that area. It could be that a workforce development board notes that this is a targeted occupation. And then there's kind of a process that we'll go through where we'll work with the Workforce Commission, with the Legislative Budget Board, with the governor's office to kind of consider these factors and determine if that should be added as a high demand field. We also need to have evidence of wages from employers in the state in that area. And it's a pretty robust process and a pretty high bar to get on that. So Commissioner, I don't know if you want to add some more comments on that.
Yeah, just one of the things two things I'd highlight. One is sort of dropping different state agencies have their own ways of carving the state up into different regions. So dropping our higher education regions and shifting over to the comptrollers regions that our local workforce boards fit more neatly into the comptrollers region. So then that lets us be a little better attuned to what the high demand fields are within a region. So what's intended in the rules is you've got sensitivity to the regional needs that'll vary region to region. We're picking up the statewide high demand fields. A lot of these are in healthcare, we know. But then there are these issues, say in semiconductors, where the state's making important investments. There are new kinds of credentials. There are new kinds of skills that employers are going to need. again, we don't have the historical data for that, but this is an emerging field that's going to be important. So there's also a mechanism to be able to pick up what's emerging and make sure that that's also recognized within the system.
Next slide. And so our last major area of discussion is some updates we're doing to kind of really the technical calculations or requirements for achieving an outcome. And this is really to make sure we're hitting those right levers and how we're kind of defining the outcome achievement. So one area in particular was with adult learners. So institutions receive additional funding for achievement of the different performance outcomes for a student who's 25 years or older. Prior rules allowed them to count an adult learner if they were 25 when they achieved a credential value, which could provide kind of an inadvertent incentive to keep a student longer. So we're transitioning that to really look at whether they were 25 during their coursework at that program. Then we're also refining our dual credit and our transfer outcomes to make sure that hours of dual credit either count towards one or the other. So if the hours count towards the dual credit outcome, they don't get counted towards the transfer outcome. So we're really only funding those once. And then we're also transitioning one of our data sources that we use for the base tier from a federal system to an in-house coordinating board system so we can really own accuracy and verify what's included in those calculations. And then kind of the last feature is really more of an indication of what's to come. It's not necessarily laid out in the rules that will be posted for tomorrow, but will really be coming towards this board in July. And that is based on how we're going to be calculating the outcomes for institutions. So we're going to be transitioning to really the more dynamic system that was always envisioned with this program, where we'll be forecasting what we anticipate that schools will achieve in each of the outcome metrics. And then we'll ultimately settle up based on what they actually do manage to achieve. And so, Commissioner, I don't know if you want to add some comments on that.
So that's one of the most important features of the new system that was envisioned in House Bill 8, not just to make the system more of an outcomes-based system, but to make the system dynamic. So the idea is to, instead of just using historical data, then the colleges will be funded on projections with a settle up on the backside of that. So there's a clearer line of sight between the decisions that the colleges are making now about what programs they're offering and how they're supporting students to what the funding will look like. So that was one of the most fundamental shifts in HB 8 from our current system into the new outcomes-based formula.
Next slide. And then next slide. And so really this is just kind of a note that this is just the start of the process. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning, the rules will be posted tomorrow. So this was rather convenient that we had this meeting already planned so we could lay out and kind of give both the public as well as y'all an indication of what will go out to the field for comment. We anticipate we'll get some really great feedback, and then we'll probably need to refine and, improve on this policy framework. And look forward to coming back to you in April with those kind of final rules for consideration. Next slide.
If I could just make one other comment about that, just before folks start texting me and saying, so we're not going to get runs until July or something like that. So the idea is that so the rule, the weights and rates are actually set in rule. So the idea is that they'd be formally adopted at the July meeting. They'd be posted before, like we would post other rules. So our intent, working in partnership with the colleges, as Emily said, is to dial in weights and rates, to have those proposed rules, a new model for the colleges and the runs well in advance of their work on their budgets in the summer. And so the weights and rates would be formally adopted at the July meeting. But that's going to be something that's going to be highly visible for the field, also with the opportunity to comment well before the weights and rates would be adopted in rule. But one of the important features I'd have to underline for the board is the fact that weights and rates are adopted in rule. I think that's an important feature of the system. There are folks that would like to see weights and rates in statute or what weights and rates delineated in riders. What's I think is really important in the structure of the system is that the legislature has entrusted the board to adopt weights and rates in the new system. That lets us be a lot more nimble, to be able to work with the colleges to continue to refine the methodology to track what's happening. And it gives the board the ability to make changes over time, depending on what you see in the data. So we're moving to a much more dynamic system with those adoption of the rules in April, and then in July, then we'll really be into the full implementation of this new dynamic outcomes-based formula that is in line with the vision for House Bill 8.
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's all upon board approval. So the board will have key decisions to make, and the board will have a lot of input, and that's very important, I think. But thank you for that timeline. So everybody has a good idea now. But the board will be very involved, and the board will make a final decision and make decisions on this. And we're looking forward to reviewing all the important information. Emily, are you completed with the presentation?
That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Excellent job on a very tedious, complex. Thank you to the community college, Ray, for being here, and the partnership and everything that we're doing to improve the process in higher education, community colleges in the state of Texas. And thanks to the legislature for all the hard work, and everybody on the board over the last couple of years, especially this past year, working on this important information. So we take this very seriously, and we know that we'll have some important decisions to make that'll affect higher education in our state, not only now, but for the future. Questions or comments for Ms. Colmier? Here.
No, I would just add to Ray, thank you and the community colleges for really rolling up your sleeves on this issue, because without that cooperation, we wouldn't be where we are. So be sure and thank everybody that participated.
Very good. Okay, so we'll move on next to agenda item 8, matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics, chaired by Mr. Javed Anwar. Javed, you're on.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner. Thank you for joining us. The matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. Yesterday in committee, we heard updates on the building a talent-strong Texas data inside the Financial Aid Advisory Committee membership of the Standing Advisory Committee for Public Junior Colleges and edits to board rules. Agenda item 8B through 8D were approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 8D13 is consideration of possible action to adopt new board rules, Chapter 15, Subchapter B, Section 15.20-15.30 concerning Texas University Fund. Ms. Emily will be able to answer any questions. Any questions?
So this is new board rules, Chapter 15B, concerning the Texas University Fund. So as you all are well aware, this is related to the passage of House Bill 1595 and its associated constitutional amendment, which was approved by voters last fall. And so this legislation eliminated the National Research University Fund and instead recreated it as the Texas University Fund, or the TUF. This also came with a $3 billion investment from the state to help start this endowment. And so this rule is supposed to help govern the eligibility, distribution methodology, and reporting for the TUF. The rules reiterate the institutions that are currently eligible for the TUF, or how an institution may become eligible for the TUF in the future in accordance with statute. And the rules also lay out how funding from the TUF is distributed each year, with the majority going to what's called the Permanent Endowment for Education and Research, or PEER-based funding, and the remainder going for the research performance funding. Research performance funding is distributed in accordance with metrics that align with our Building a Talent Strong Texas plan, with the majority based on an institution's federal and private research expenditures and a portion based on research doctorates that are awarded at that school. The rules also lay out the mathematical calculation of the buy-in amount for institutions who become eligible for the fund, how much institutions can claim in their financial reporting of the endowment fund, and also required the coordinating board to annually publish the research metrics related to this fund so institutions can track their progress towards eligibility. We did use negotiated rulemaking to develop these rules, and there were no public comments. That concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? If not, members, is there a motion to adopt new board rules, chapter 15, subchapter B, section 15.20-15.30 concerning the Texas University Fund? Do
So moved.
I have a motion and a second, please? And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 8D 14 was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 8D 15 is consideration of possible action to adopt new board rules, chapter 22, subchapter K, section 22.200, 22.210 concerning the Texas Transfer Grant Program. Dr. Charles Quintero present this item.
Thank you. Following up on yesterday's committee meeting, I'm pleased to present to you the rules for Chapter 22, Subchapter K, which creates a new financial aid program here at the agency, the Texas Transfer Grant. We were very excited that the General Appropriations Act for the current biennium authorized the agency to create this state-funded version of the Texas Transfer Grant, which we had previously operated using federal GEAR funds to pilot the program. The state-funded program is going to help target funds to support transfer students who completed an associate degree at a public two-year institution with at least a 2.5 grade point average, including the completion of the core curriculum. I presented the details of the rules yesterday. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about these rules.
Do we have any questions? If not, I need a motion and a second, please.
I'll move.
Emma
Emma.
Schwartz has moved. Emma Schwartz has moved, Mr. Anwar.
Okay.
Second by Ashley
Okay, great.
Thomas.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion passes. Agenda item D, 16 and 17 were approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item 8D 18 is considered possible action to adopt a new board rules, chapter 22, subchapter M, section 22.265, and amendments to the board rules, chapter 22, subchapter M, section 22.254, 22.256-22.259, 22.261, 22.62, and 22.264 concerning the Texas Education Opportunity Grant Program. Members, you have a supplement material for this printed on the gold rod paper. Dr. Charles Quintero is present this item and will be available to answer any questions. Doc, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, following up on yesterday's committee meeting, I'm pleased to present the outcome of the negotiated rulemaking that occurred this past summer for the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program. The committee did reach consensus and is proposing rule changes to Chapter 22, subchapters M, to accomplish three specific pieces in addition to some non-substantive adjustments. Specifically, it revises the maximum grant calculation to account for both in-district and out-of-district tuition rates, which creates greater flexibility for the institutions. It expands the definition of entering undergraduate to include the first 45 semester credit hours to better acknowledge the variety of pathways that students might take to starting an associate degree or certificate. And it also expands the definition of certificate program to include a broader range of credentials of value, expanding as well into students who are completing these credentials through career and technical education coursework, in addition to the academic programs that have previously been eligible. I'm happy to answer any questions and pass it to you all.
Members, anybody questions? Member, is there a motion to adopt new chapter 22, subchapter M, section 22.265 and amendments to the board rules, chapter 22, subchapter M, section 22.24, 22.256 22.259, 22.261, 22.262, and 22.264 concerning the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant. Do I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
And I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 8D19 was approved on the consent calendar. This concludes our portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anwar. At this time, we're not going to take lunch, but we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then when we come back in 5 minutes, we're going to proceed to agenda item 10, matters relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
They're trying to freeze me out. They're trying to fix it. They're trying to fix it. Miss Mary was texting me. She's like, I'm
relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Agenda item 10 is chaired by Vice Chair Donna Williams. Ms. Williams.
Good morning to Commissioner Cummings. Sit down. Good morning. During the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success meeting yesterday, the committee approved the following items: minutes of the October 26th meeting, a report on school closures and/or teach-outs pursuant to Board Rule 7.76, request to approve the July 2023 Annual Compliance Report for institutions under a Certificate of Authorization, a 2-year service contract with the University of Texas at Austin, a request by Barber College Independent School District, Lee College, regarding a branch campus maintenance tax election and a branch campus approval, awards over $5 million for the Graduate Medical Education Expansion Grant Program, a request from Healing Hands Massage Institute for a Certificate of Authority to grant degrees in Texas, and 3 new degree programs. Agenda item 10B and 10C were approved on consent. Agenda item 10D is consideration and possible action to approve a 2-year service contract with the University of Texas at Austin for creating and scaling the Texas Computer Science Pipeline Project at a cost not to exceed $14 million. Dr. Michelle Singh, Assistant Commissioner for Digital Learning, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Farias, Vice Chair Williams, and esteemed members of the committee. It's wonderful to see you again. I am Michelle Singh, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Founding Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Digital Learning. The General Appropriations Act of the 88th Texas Legislature added $5 million in general revenue in fiscal year 2024 and $5 million in general revenue in fiscal year 2025 to consolidate and streamline computer science education by establishing a statewide computer science pipeline initiative. In addition, $2 million in general revenue in fiscal year 2024 and $2 million in fiscal year 2025 was appropriated contingent upon the Computer Science Pipeline Initiative raising at least $2 million in gifts and donations each fiscal year. As mentioned yesterday, the Expanding Pathways in Computing, EPIC, unit of the Texas Advanced Computing Center at the University of Texas at Austin has extensive experience coordinating statewide STEM teacher professional development networks, and their signature teacher professional development program, We Teach CS, will serve as the model for creating and scaling the Computer Science Pipeline Initiative. Staff is seeking approval to enter into a 2-year service contract with the University of Texas at Austin for creating and scaling the Computer Science Pipeline Initiative at a cost not to exceed $14 million. The staff recommendation to the committee was approved yesterday. Thank you for your time, and I am available to answer any questions.
Members, any questions for Dr. Singh? Questions or comments? Nope. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the 2-year service contract with the University of Texas at Austin for creating and scaling the Texas Computer Science Pipeline Project at a cost not to exceed $14 million? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion by Dr. Frias. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ashley Thomas. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations. Agenda item 10E is consideration and possible action to approve a resolution on the request by Barber Hills Independent School District, Lee College, regarding a branch campus tax election and a branch campus approval. Dr. Tina Jackson, Assistant Commissioner for Workforce Education, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and board members. I'm Tina Jackson. I serve as Assistant Commissioner of Workforce Education. This agenda item pertains to the proposal by Lee College District to create a branch campus within the Barbers Hill Independent School District, and the proposal by Barbers Hill ISD to conduct a maintenance tax election to establish maintenance tax to be levied by the Barbers Hill District to financially support the branch campus. Today, you are being asked to approve a resolution in accordance with Chapter 130, Subchapter K of the Texas Education Code and the Coordinating Board implementing rules on Barbers Hills ISD's request to conduct a branch campus maintenance tax election and establish a branch campus maintenance tax upon voters' approval, and the formation and operation of Lee College's proposed branch campus contingent upon the branch campus maintenance tax receiving voter approval. You have a copy of the resolution in your supplemental handout. As background, in December of 2022, Lee College submitted a proposal and feasibility study for the creation of a branch campus within Barbers Hills ISD that is expected to serve 1,000 students. 4 key activities have occurred since that submission. First, Lee College conducted a self-study to ensure that the branch campus would meet standards and criteria for instruction and support services required by the Commission on Colleges and Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. Following completion of the self-study, Commissioner Keller appointed 3 college presidents to serve as external evaluator team. That team consisted of Dr. Richard Rhodes, Dr. Russell Lowry Hart, and Dr. Christina Pounce. They found that Lee College's self-study successfully addressed each criteria set forth by the Coordinating Board rules for branch campus approval. In February of 2023, Coordinating Board staff conducted a site visit and concluded that all requirements had been met for approval of a branch campus. And in late 2023, Barbers Hill ISD submitted a certified voters petition to the Coordinating Board for a maintenance tax election. Based on the Coordinating Board staff review of the information provided by Barbers Hill ISD, the proposed tax does not exceed 5 cents on each $100 valuation of all taxable property in Barbers Hill ISD jurisdiction. Barbers Hill ISD submitted to the Coordinating Board a petition for the proposed branch campus maintenance tax election that Barbers Hill ISD determined is legal and genuine and has been signed by over 5% of the registered and qualified voters within Barbers Hill ISD. The proposed tax is feasible and desirable under the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board rules. Coordinating Board staff recommend approval of the resolution as presented, and this concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? And I failed to mention that there is supplemental material printed on the gold rod paper, but Dr. Jackson referenced it in her remarks. Is there any questions or comments?
So technically, why is the bond issuance from their ISD coming before us for approval, or is that part of the funding box that we need to?
So I'm not sure if I know the question, the answer to your question, Mr. Wilson, but the statute requires under 130-253, we have to approve both the permission for them to establish the tax. So I don't think we weigh in on the bond issuance, and then we have to allow them to do the election,
right?
To have the branch campus and to do the election. So just in response to yesterday, Ms. Williams had asked a question, and so we just checked with their counsel because we don't have counsel, and nor do we counsel around election law questions. So we did just check with them on your question, Ms. Williams. To which they said, the resolution will authorize them to conduct the election. They can elect up to that tax rate, so they may elect less than the tax rate. That's an ongoing maintenance tax, and that would only be repealed if the voters had another election to repeal or reduce the tax rate, or there was a legislative action. So we're not weighing in on their bond issuance, I don't believe. We're just giving the permission required by statute to allow them to conduct that election based on the feasibility study that the board did in this case.
Got it. Thanks.
For the record, you gave the answer to the question. What was my question?
Ms. Williams, I believe you asked whether the tax was for a time certain or an ongoing tax. And it is an ongoing tax subject to legislative or voter repeal.
All right, thank you. I know, I was just testing you. Any additional questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve a resolution on the request by Barbers Hill Independent School District Lee College regarding a branch campus maintenance tax election and a branch campus approval? May I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Ashley Thomas. May I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Dr. Frias. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item 10F was approved on consent. Agenda item 10G is consideration and possible action to adopt the recommendation relating to a request from Healing Hands Massage Institute for a certificate of authority to grant degrees in Texas. Ms. Elizabeth Mayer, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Ms. Mayer?
Good morning again. So you all heard this presentation yesterday. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights from that. So Healing Hands Massage Institute in Richardson, Texas, seeks approval for its first certificate of authority to grant an Associate of Applied Science degree in massage therapy. They submitted the initial certificate of authority application in October of 2022. A site visit was conducted, and based upon that, the site evaluation team report was submitted to the coordinating board on February the 21st, 2023. The report did find that Healing Hands Massage Institute was in compliance of 4 of the 24 coordinating board required standards and were not in compliance or lacked information to support compliance with 20 of the standards. The Certification Advisory Committee or Council, the CAC, voted unanimously to recommend denial of the Healing Hands Massage Institute's application for its first certificate of authority. The commissioner has also independently made the recommendation to deny Healing Hands Massage Institute's application for its first certificate of authority based upon the information provided from the CAC. So again, the recommendation is to deny the application for a certificate of authority for Healing Hands Massage Institute. And that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Mayer? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the recommendation to deny the application for Healing Hands Massage Institute for a certificate of authority to grant degrees in Texas? May I have a motion? I'll move. May I have a second?
I second.
I have a second by Amy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 5H1 is consideration and possible action to approve the request from the University of Texas at El Paso for a Doctor of Philosophy, PhD in Physics. Ms. Mayer will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Stephen Kreitz, Dean of Graduate School, and Dr. Mark Peterson, Chair, Department of Physics, will also be available to answer questions. Ms. Mayer?
The University of Texas at El Paso is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Philosophy degree program in physics, and that it would begin in fall of 2024. The proposed program would be offered face-to-face to students in El Paso. And in accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, UTEP will hire 2 core faculty members to start in the fall of 2024, and then a 3rd core faculty member to start in the fall of 2025, and a 4th faculty member to start in the fall of 2026. That concludes my remarks.
Good morning. I first want to thank all of you for your service on the board and consideration of this proposal. A little about UTEP. We now have 25 doctoral programs, a couple professional. And what is surprising is we don't yet have a program in physics, but given its fundamental nature for many of the disciplines. And to illustrate that, our physics faculty have actually been actively involved in PhD supervision for years, but they're doing that in computational science, environmental science and engineering, biomedical engineering, and I'm forgetting one of the other ones. Computational. So they have been actively involved, but what they haven't been able to do is supervise students in some of the core areas. This proposal, where we have some expertise in quantum, which it's hugely important now, and Dr. Peterson can talk more about that since I'm not a physicist.
Yes, well, thank you very much for considering this. I'm the chair of the department at the University of Texas, El Paso. We have quite an excellent cadre of scientists in the areas of magnetism and computing, which are two of the fundamental areas related to growing quantum science in America. This PhD program will make a PhD program available to about 1 million Texas residents who would have otherwise had to travel 300 to 500 miles to another PhD granting institution in Texas. It will prepare them for jobs in quantum science, as noted, the needed by the federal government in 2021 report. But not only that, by having our undergraduates being taught by PhD TAs rather than master's TAs, that will raise their boats higher. It'll also add synergy to the College of Science and the university, and of course, prevent what we're seeing right now, where Texas is bringing in 170 PhD physicists per year to match their need of 300 PhD physicists per year. We're only producing 130. I'd be happy to take questions if there are some.
Definitely a need.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in physics, but I do have a minor in physics. And I know that a lot of pre-professional, pre-meds have to take physics, and that's the majority of the students in the pre-requirements for health professions, physics 101, 102. But my question is more on the faculty in terms of how is your faculty situation in terms of having for these PhD training programs? Obviously, there's a big need by the data, but how are you prepared in terms of providing the faculty? And oh, by the way, I'm on the University of Texas Systems Executive Committee, and we're going to be beginning on your campus. We'll be there. Our meeting will be there, so I'm looking forward to that meeting at UT. So maybe I'll go by your physics area as well. But my point being is that I'm wondering about the faculty positions in physics specifically.
Yes, we currently have 18 faculty members. All of them are research active. We have some of the most prominent researchers, according to Stanford's citation indices in our department. We have grants totaling about $3 million per year from federal government. So we will be able to, in addition to take in the TAs we take in to manage the teaching loads, have about the same number of graduate students that are doing research. The faculty is very much aware that they want to get our TAs into research as soon as possible, and we have the research visibility to make that happen. We're very much prepared for it.
So in your part of the state, you're not having trouble recruiting specialties in physics?
I think it's pretty clear that there's a shortage of physicists right now. If you look at the national trends, the state of Texas has gone from 130 in 2019 to about 90 graduates per year. And that is following national trends. We are seeing that in the job market, that we have to compete aggressively to attract the best professors. We're doing that, and we're confident that we can continue to do that. But you're right. There's a tremendous need for more faculty positions in physics, and case in point, the report that the federal government took out in 2021 was about the national need for experts in quantum science. They pointed out that both Europe and China were in front of us, and that there's going to have to be an incredible increase in emphasis in both training, research, and recruitment.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And please do stop by.
I'll try to.
Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the request from the University of Texas at El Paso for a Doctor of Philosophy or PhD in Physics? May I
I'm
have a
happy to
motion?
make that motion.
Thank you. Ms. Swartz?
And I'll second.
Our member from El Paso makes the motion. Thank you, Em.
Thank you.
We know you're on there on the.
And seconded by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations. Agenda item 5H2 is consideration and possible action to approve the request from the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston for a Doctor of Nursing Practice, a DPN in nurse anesthesia. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Deborah Jones, Dean, School of Nursing, and Dr. Kristen
Stearns-Ott.
Stearns-Ott. Thank you. And they spelled it for me phonetically, but I just went blank up here. Vice Dean of Academic Affairs and Endowed Chairs in Nursing is also available to answer questions. Ms. Mayer.
The University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Nursing Practice or DNP degree program in nurse anesthesia that would begin in the fall of 2024. The proposed program would be offered face-to-face to students in Galveston, and the institution currently has all the faculty in place before the program starting, so no additional hires would be needed in years 1 through 5. That concludes my remarks.
Oh, hires. Thank you.
Good
Dr. Jones?
morning.
Good morning.
And thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chair, as well as the board. We are very excited about the possibility of starting this program, launching this program this fall. Since I began at UTMB, which by the way is over 135 years old and the oldest school of nursing southwest of Texas. So we've been doing education for quite some time. But since I began, there have been students asking about, are we going to have a CRNA program? There have been employees within our health system asking about a CRNA program. And we lucked up to be able to hire Dr. Stearns-Ott as a Vice Dean of Academic Affairs in 2020 actually, who is also CRNA and who has led CRNA programs in the past. And so we began that launch back then to really get this started. We are excited about the possibility. We have the resources and the support from our institution to be able to do so, and really think we will help to meet a need within the state of Texas with more CRNAs across the state.
All right, thank you so much for having us this morning. I did want to also add the need for a CRNA in the state of Texas. Currently, we are looking at a significant shortage across the state, and it is relatively concerning that by 2030, we will have a 22% need over this very short few years. We have a deficit in these providers across the state. And as Dean Jones indicated, we have had a request both from healthcare workers within our system and our health system leadership to partner with them to provide this program so they can build their workforce within UTMB to support the anesthesia services and the growth in Southeast Texas.
Where's the closest DRN program to Galveston? I know we
Houston.
Houston?
The closest is in Houston.
In
UT
Houston.
Health Science Center, Houston.
Yeah.
Is the closest one.
It's the closest one, yeah. I know there's a significant need. We've approved several over the last maybe 6 months or so. So,
Yeah, I even had a conversation yesterday with the UT San Antonio and the UT Houston Dean about this. And San Antonio, who just got approved last year, they had 86 applicants for 18 students.
Yeah.
Houston has over 200, 300 applicants for 20 students that they admit per year. So we won't have an issue in terms of student. And the way that our program is set up, we certainly think they'll be successful.
absolutely, absolutely. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the request from the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston for a Doctor of Nursing Practice, a DNP, in nurse anesthesia? May I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Thomas, may I have a second? Second by Mr. Wong. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Agenda item 5H3 is consideration and possible action to approve the request from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Philosophy, a PhD in Computer Science with interdisciplinary applications. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Guy Bailey, President, and Emmett Tomei, Professor and Chair of Computer Science, will also be available to answer questions. Ms. Mayer.
All right. The University of Texas Rio Grande Valley is seeking approval to offer a Doctor of Philosophy degree program in computer science with interdisciplinary applications that would begin in the fall of 2024. The proposed program would be offered face-to-face to students in the Rio Grande Valley. The institution will hire 2 tenure-track faculty in years 1 through 5 to begin the program. And that concludes my remarks for this.
Oh, thank you. We deeply appreciate your consideration of our request for this, and thank you for all you do for the state of Texas. And by the way, thank you to some of you for hiring our students too. We deeply appreciate that. But as you know, there's a robust workforce need for people in computing, and I think there are supposed to be 377,000 plus jobs opening on average every year. Now, while master's and bachelor's programs have been growing, doctoral programs have not grown at that rate. And as was pointed out with physics, you have to hire faculty to expand those programs. And of course, the rise of data science, data analytics, all of these things, it just expand that need. Now, and the need is especially great for Hispanic students. They're comprise 43% of the students enrolled in university programs in the state of Texas, but only 20% of the BS degrees in computer science went to Hispanic or Latino students, and only 3% of the doctoral degrees. Now, what that meant was that 4 doctoral degrees and only 17 in the last 4 years went to Hispanic students. So you can see the need there. And we think we can help take care of that problem pretty easily. Our computer science program has been growing very fast. You have nearly 1,300 majors now, and the master's level has grown by 75%, and 90% of the students in computer science at UTRGV are Hispanic or Latino. So, and we're one of the top 5 producers of Hispanic computer science degrees in the United States, both at the bachelor's and master's level. And I should also point out the closest PhD in computing science is in San Antonio, and that's a 3.5-4 hour drive away. That program was started, I think, 27 years ago. Mm-hmm. When that program was started, at this time, I was sitting before this same committee as provost at UTSA asking for that degree. You approved it. It's been very successful, and you can see what's happened there. I think it will be equally successful in the Rio Grande Valley. Dr. Tomei, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bailey, and thank you all. We're extremely excited about this program. There's a tremendous amount of need, and we have access to an enormous pool of untapped Texas talent in our region who has not traditionally gone into computing. Mm-hmm. And having this PhD program on top of our already growing undergraduate and master's programs is going to give them that opportunity to address this need. We're really excited about that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Any questions or comments?
I'd like to make a comment. I'm proud to be from the Rio Grande Valley, but I'd like to, I'm sure the board notices that Dr. Bailey is doing a great job. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Bailey, we've noticed that every time there's a program, he is here. Other presidents take note, I say, from around the state, but we appreciate it. He's extremely busy. Your whole team is here, and it's great because you're doing a great job, and your proposals are right on line what the region needs, what the state needs. And Dr. Tomei, thank you for all the work. I'm familiar with the science program, computer science program, and all the work that's being done there. obviously in my backyard, but the work that y'all are doing is not only statewide, but national in terms of the programming and the great success in terms of growing enrollment, doing things the right way, and looking forward to our Division I football program starting in the Valley next year.
I have a great team. By the way, one point I would also like to make, we now have about 550 doctoral students. Only 13% of those are international. The vast majority of our students are Texas students, and the majority of those are Rio Grande Valley. So we think we're doing a great job of recruiting and keeping talent in the state of Texas.
And that's important. So thank you, Dr. Bailey, for bringing that up.
Additional comments, questions?
I mean, I would just say with everything, so all the exciting things going on in the Valley, that this would be the right time to roll that out.
Thank you.
I would like to also comment, really surprised or really important data that you're serving so many Texas PhD. This is amazing. I don't see any other institutions keeping all of Texas PhD here in-house, but thank you for your tremendous work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'd like to make the motion
Okay.
for the approval of the program.
All right. The motion has been made. And do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wilson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you so much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Congratulations. Next is agenda item 10I1 is consideration and possible action to adopt proposed amendments to Board Rules, Chapter 2, Subchapter E, Section 2.87, and new Board Rules, Chapter 4, Subchapter J, Sections 4.191 through 4.192 concerning institutional accreditation requirements. Members, you have supplemental materials for this item presented on the gold rod paper. Elizabeth Mayer will present this item and be available to answer questions.
Okay, so as I reviewed yesterday, these are the revisions to the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 2, Subchapter E, Section 2.887, concerning the approval of baccalaureate degrees at public junior colleges. And in addition, we've also added new rules in the Administrative Code, Chapter 4, a new subchapter J, concerning recognized institutional accreditors. You all heard this morning in the major policy discussion about accreditation. And so as was discussed yesterday, these rules are really intended to align with the U.S. Departments of Education's rules that allow those historic regional accrediting organizations to accredit institutions anywhere in the country. So specifically, the amended section authorizes a public junior college with a baccalaureate degree the ability to change accreditors if it has already been approved by SAC-COC. And then secondly, the new rule change aligns with the Texas Education Code, Section 61.051 and 61.00313, which provides the board with the authority to the coordinating board and designate recognized accrediting organizations. As I mentioned yesterday, there were no comments received regarding this rule, and we do recommend adoption.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, members, we have two motions for this agenda item. One is for the amendments to Chapter 2, and the other is for new rules in Chapter 4. Do I have a motion to adopt the proposed amendments to Board Rules, Chapter 2, Subchapter E, Section 2.8 concerning institutional accreditation requirements? May I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Thomas. May I have a second by Dr. Frias. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Now we'll take up the second motion. Do I have a motion to adopt new Board Rules, Chapter 4, Subchapter J, Sections 4.191 through 4.192 concerning institutional accreditation requirements? May I have a motion? I'll move. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Thomas. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 10I1, 10I2, and 10I8 were approved on consent. Agenda item 10I9 is consideration and possible action to amend and adopt new board rules, chapter 22, subchapter N, sections 22.265 through 22.277 concerning Texas Leadership Scholars Program. Dr. Jenny L. Strother will present this item and be available to answer questions.
Good morning. I think I can still say good morning. So Jenny L. Strother, Assistant Commissioner for Student Success. As we mentioned yesterday, the Texas Leadership Scholars Program is a scholarship program for high-achieving, low-income students in the state of Texas, where we focus on our top 10% high school graduates. The students not only receive a scholarship covering 100% of their tuition and fees, but also a housing and food stipend. And that is for all 4 years of their experience. But in addition, the students also receive targeted and intentional student success programming like academic support and leadership development through living and learning communities, mentorship, undergraduate research, and they have the opportunity to participate in leadership conferences and study abroad opportunities. As you know, we have been able to enroll 2 cohorts by leveraging GEAR funds. And I'm so excited to say that the first cohort is experiencing a 95% persistence rate, and the second cohort is at 98%, which both are well above the statewide average. Today's rule amendments for your consideration include the following. We are requesting to amend Chapter 22 and adopt Subchapter N for new rules regarding the Texas Leadership Scholars Program. The new rules provide clarity and guidance to students, participating institutions, and coordinating board staff for the program's implementation. There were 2 comments received during the 30-day public comment period regarding this rule. Although the comments focused on eligibility, transferability, and hardship clarifications, no changes to the rules were required. This concludes my remarks, and I'm available for any questions.
Read it and pass it on. Any questions or comments? Okay, excuse me, hearing none. Members, I have a note under my nose. We need all members to vote on the agenda items, if you would. Do I have a motion to amend and adopt new board rules, chapter 22, subchapter N, sections 22.265 through 27.277 concerning the Texas Leadership Scholars Program? May I have a motion?
Emma will move.
I have a motion by Ms. Schwartz. I have a second by Dr. Wong. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. This concludes the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Next, we move into agenda item 11, which are matters relating to the Agency Operations Committee, chaired by Ms. Emma Schwartz. Emma.
Good afternoon. During the Agency Operations Committee meeting yesterday, the committee approved the minutes from the October 2023 Agency Operations Committee meeting. The committee also received a report on grants and contracts, a review of the fiscal year 2024 financial report, a request to approve the updated internal audit charter, an update on internal audit reports and activities, and an update on federal and state compliance monitoring reports and activities. Agenda item 11B and 11C were approved on consent. Agenda item 11D is consideration and possible action to approve the updated internal audit charter. Mr. Arby Gonzalez, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and be available to answer any questions. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz, committee members. My name is Arby Gonzalez, and I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance. And I'm here seeking your approval for our internal audit charter, which was last updated last January 2023. I'll give a short summary of my presentation from yesterday. The internal audit charter, it's a formal document that defines the internal audit's purpose, authority, and responsibility. It establishes our position within the organization. It authorizes full and unfettered access to do the work that we do, and it defines the scope of our activities. The charter also serves to reaffirm the board's commitment to our independence and the work that we do. Professional standards require that the board approve the charter, and statute requires that we follow those standards. We updated the charter mainly to reflect current division leadership and to add approval from the Agency Operations Committee to solidify the working relationship between internal audit, AOC, and the board. We also made non-substantive plain language updates and adjusted formatting. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, do we have any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the updated internal audit charter?
So moved, Ms. Donna.
Okay, Ms. Williams, do we have a second?
Second.
By Dr. Farias. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, the motion passes. Agenda items 11E, 1 through 3 are the auditor's update on internal audit reports and activities. These items do not require any action. Mr. Arby Gonzalez and Mr. Paul Mayard, Assistant Director for Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and are available to answer any questions. Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Mayard.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. I will be presenting this on my own. Paul wasn't able to make it today, so I'll be up here on my own. Since October, internal audit started 2 projects. We started a project related to Texas Research Incentive Program, or TRIP. It's currently in the fieldwork phase. Our objective is to determine how our agency can enhance its processes to ensure that higher education institutions comply with TRIP requirements. We've also started an advisory project with funding and resource planning related to community college finance. This means we're available to provide any insight or feedback related to risk and controls as we continue to implement the new funding model. We've also reviewed previous recommendations related to gear. We have not seen any substantial or systemic issues, but we do also understand that this is an ongoing process and we'll continue to monitor documentation as needed. We've also assisted with external audits, and mainly since last October, we've been filling our team, including hiring an internal audit director starting February 1st. This concludes my update, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Great. Members, do you have any questions? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item. Agenda item 11F, 1 through 5 are the auditor's update on state and federal compliance monitoring reports and activities. These items do not require any action, and Mr. Arby Gonzalez will answer any questions. Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes, sure. We completed 4 compliance monitoring projects and a corrective action status report since our last meeting in October. I want to highlight 2 of these reports. First, an audit of tuition equalization grant at Jarvis Christian University. It had 1 observation of non-compliance related to cash management and disbursement requirements. The institution did not disperse all of the TEG funds it received, or it did disperse all of the funds that it received, but it did not do so in a timely manner. The institution indicated they were unaware of cash management and disbursement requirements, and they will update their policies and procedures to comply with the TEG guidelines and requirements based on our review. Secondly, I'd like to touch briefly on the review of formula funding at University of Houston. Although our review had no observations, there was a review by the University of Houston internal audit related to allegations of improper formula funding processes. The internal audit from U of H issued a report confirming that some students owed their full balance that were allowed to stay enrolled in their courses past the census date. Additionally, they also identified control deficiencies and errors related to the reporting process. U of H is in the process of implementing those recommendations from internal audit, and we will follow up with additional testing of the institution's certified student data during the next formula funding base year. Using this approach will allow us to review new data occurring after the institution has implemented those updates and those changes. With regards to federal compliance monitoring, we continue to make progress with federal grant subrecipient reviews of GEAR funding and Perkins. And we're also beginning our review of institutional single audit reporting for fiscal year 23. That concludes my compliance monitoring update. Now I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Members, do you have any questions? Hearing none, this concludes the Agency Operations Committee agenda.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Okay, agenda item 12, adjournment. And this concludes our meeting. The time is now 12:08. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Donna.
Okay, motion by Ms. Williams. Do I have a second for adjournment? Second by Mr. Anwar. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you all for a very good meeting.
Bye,
Have a
Emma.
good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.